and started dabbling in drugs when I was 14 years old. And by the time I was 17 years old, I was a drug addict. But my very first board meeting, I'm sitting in that, you almost feel like you have imposter syndrome, right? But the longer I sat there, I realized I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be in this room. This is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And sometimes it takes a strong leader like President Trump, right? Coming out and kind of ripping all the covers off of what's been going on, and you get a chance to see we've been deceived. Like, we are the majority.
Talking about school safety, because obviously anytime anybody talks about schools, it's school shootings.
Right.
Welcome to God and Country, and Rod Hall, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
That is great to have you here. I was actually looking forward to bringing you in, because particularly this particular week, because we're now here at Holy Week. We're going to have Easter here on Sunday.
Yes,
I can't think of a better way of celebrating Easter week than having a pastor in our
Happy Good Friday.
pastor in our podcast. What we want to do is just kind of start off and how you got started. So let's go back to your youth, and how'd you establish your morals and values? What brought you to that? And obviously that had to have led you to becoming a pastor.
Sure. Yep. So I'll go way back. Okay. My dad was military in the Air Force. We went from North Dakota. So first of all, he joined the Air Force so he could see the world. And we originated in Georgia, ended up in North Dakota, from North Dakota to Ohio, and from Ohio to Utah. And
That was the world.
That was the world that he got to see, but that's what brought us to Utah. So got here when I was 10 years old and grew up, went to elementary, junior high, high school here in Utah. And I'll just go way back to
Which high school?
Northridge. First year at Open. Yep.
Oh,
First
Northridge.
Full graduating
So
class.
all my
out of
kids went to Northridge,
Yeah.
so I'm
Nice.
proud of Northridge
Yeah,
too. So that's good.
That's the school. It is. Yep. So way back when I was 14 years old, I started getting in with the wrong crowd when I was 14. That's junior high school, and started dabbling in drugs when I was 14 years old. And by the time I was 17 years old, I was a drug addict. And to think about that progression happening so quickly it's hard to imagine that. But by the time I was 17 years old, I was a drug addict and started using hard drugs. By the time I was 21 years old, I'd been in and out of treatment programs and just really made a mess of my life. Now, let me go back a little bit. My mom's always been a God-fearing woman who walks with the Lord, loves the Lord, and she had been praying for me since my whole life, but really taking me to the Lord in prayer from the time I started acting up when I was 14 years old. And my wife and I have bbeen together since junior high school, so I'm trying to give you guys that picture. So she wasn't a part of all that, but she had been through that process with me. So by the time I was 21 years old, I had really made a mess of my life, and I'd been in and out of treatment programs. And I remember coming home after being gone for about 5 days. My mom, she had brought me my name before the church and said, "Look, my son's been missing for 5 days, and we don't know where he's at." And my church gathered together and they prayed and asked for the Lord to just get a hold of my heart, get a hold of my life. And I came home that next day, not knowing that any of this had happened. And I saw my wife, and she was my wife at that time. We'd just been newly married, probably 6 months at this time. And I knew she was done.
Really, how old were you at the time?
21. I was 21.
21. You went
Yep.
missing.
Yep. I was missing for almost 6 days at that point. And I had been, messing up and in and out of treatment, and she was done. And I could see it in her eyes. And I asked her, I said, "Would you allow me to go one more time? Like, this will be it." So I went to treatment. I went to a place that was called ACT. It was ranked number 2 in the nation at the time. So one of the top treatment programs in the nation. I went there for 48 days. And the day that I got out, I used drugs. The day that I got out. So I went to an NA program with a friend that I had made while I was in the program. And we went to this meeting, and afterwards he pulled out some drugs, and I used that night. And I knew, I said, if my wife finds out, she'll be done. It'll be it. So I faked sleep and, pretending like everything was okay and all the stuff that you would do if you're trying to play those types of things off. And the next day, my mom came to my house. And now, mind you, nobody knew. Not a single person knew I had done this. I was out on my back deck, and I was smoking a cigarette. She just walked right into my apartment, right out to my back deck. And she looked me in the eye. She said, "Don't play games with God." And she turned around and walked out of my apartment. No joke. And I felt like God himself was speaking to me that day, like, this is it. And so that Sunday, I went back to church. Now, this is a church I grew up in. I was a teenager there, and I got away from the Lord there, all those other things. And I was terrified to go because everybody knew my business. My mom had the whole church pray for me. You know, they knew what I was going through. And when I walked in the doors, it was life-changing because instead of the judgment that I thought I'd receive, nothing but love. People walking up, hugging me, crying over me, so excited that I was there. And it was a life-changing moment. And that New Year's Eve of 1998, I got on my face before God and I said, I've made a mess of my life. Would you take it and do something with it? And God just began to transform me from the inside out, to change me. And I started working with young people just a couple months in. I remember going to the pastor and saying, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I want to help. You know what I mean? And I mean, mind you, I'd only been clean for a couple of months at this time. So he's taking a big risk letting me come in and help, but he did. He let me come in and help with games. And I just wanted to be a presence and be there. And a few months into it, he goes, why don't you share your story? I've only been clean for probably 4 months at this time. And I was supposed to take the whole lesson time, and only lasted for about 5 minutes. I cried halfway through it. I just cried and cried and cried, talking about what God had done in my life and where I'd been and where it brought me to. And that was kind of the start of heading in the direction that I'm at now today. And about 6 months into me being there, he pulled me aside and said, I want you to do this more. I want you to be more involved. And I want you to have a key and the alarm code to the church. Now, that may not seem like a big deal to anybody else, but for me, it was
big trust.
Huge. It was huge. I had stolen from my mom, my mother-in-law. I mean, everybody who was close to me in my life, I had stolen from them because I was a drug addict. And I had been clean for probably 6, maybe 7 months at this time, and I just couldn't believe that God was giving me another opportunity like this. And that's how I saw it. I know that he was just an instrument, but it was another opportunity for me in my life.
Isn't it amazing how God's right there, just waiting for the moment? I'm just waiting for you to turn. I'm right here.
Yep, 100%.
Been with you the whole time.
And it transformed me. It changed me. And so...
what I think is most amazing is your pastor there, your leader, he kind of knew that service would help. And that's the one thing that I notice throughout life is people who forget about themselves, stop thinking about themselves, that actually go serving others.
Yeah.
It heals you faster, and it helps you stay on that path better. Because it's really easy to fall back into the drugs again and stuff like that if it's about you. Yep. If you're, poor me, I'm not worth it, I'm diseased, I'm an exile, I'm all this kind of stuff. But that's what Satan wants you to think, right? Because that's how he gets at you and gets you to fall again.
Yes.
But the second you leave yourself and you start serving others, it's like miracles happen. Yep. And that's what you did. So kind of, let's go back one more time.
Okay.
How did you start? I mean, there might be teenagers listening to this show. Is obvious, as a friends or acquaintances, how did that initially start? What do people need to look out for on that when that started?
It started with wanting to be liked, right? I think everybody, so sometimes you're open to whatever comes your direction. And I just chose friends that I knew weren't going the direction I needed to go. These were people that weren't, but they were the cool kids, you know what I mean? And it was nice to be liked by the cool kids, and pursuing wrong influences will allow you to become the wrong influence, right? It started out with me hanging out with the wrong influences to maturing into me becoming that influence that you wouldn't want your kids to be around. It kind of morphed into that. So it started with the seed of allowing the wrong people into my life and knowing that they weren't the right people at the time, and then becoming that, eventually down the road. So I would encourage young people, we have to, I don't think you can really come to know who you are, and somebody may not like this, but I don't think you can come to know who you are without your Creator revealing to you who that is. So I challenge young people to develop a personal, intimate relationship with Christ, like not your parents' relationship, not your grandparents, but your personal, intimate relationship with Christ. That's been the cry of my life. Like, until it's real to you, it's not real. It's got to become real to you in your life. And so when you pursue that, the one who created you, the Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made, all of a sudden shows you that you're not just made on purpose, but for a purpose in your life. And it changes everything for you. It changes your direction. So the young people that we work with today, that's my cry to them. Find out who you are. God made you. When he made you, he broke the mold. There's not another person like you on this planet. And so you're intended to play a song. You know what I mean? Like a violin, you can't restring and string your instrument your whole life and never play the song that you were intended to play. We want to find out why we're here. And only God can show you and direct you in that purpose. And so that's what makes the biggest difference is when you invite God into that space and find out why you're here. He'll direct you to the right friends. He'll direct you, in the right direction, help you to take the steps you need to take. But it has to
come from you.
It has to.
And I think those are perfect. And that's response is absolutely perfect because what I see you struggle with, and it's been since the dawn of time, right? It's just peer pressure.
Yes.
It's particularly teenagers. Why? Because that's that dying desire to be accepted.
Absolutely.
I want a crowd. I want to fit in. I want to be popular.
Yep.
Because if I'm not a part of the crowd, if I don't fit in, then it means something bad about me.
Right.
I'm not worth it. And they make the peer pressure and the self-esteem kind of mix.
Yes. Yes.
And you got to separate the two. Your
So true.
self-esteem has nothing to do with how well you're accepted in society.
Yep.
But if you mix self-esteem with peer pressure, then all of a sudden your self-esteem is dependent on it.
Yep.
And then that's when you're susceptible to falling like this. And
Absolutely.
but if you know yourself, you know Christ, then you understand that my self-esteem comes from God. It
where
does
my
not
identity
come
is,
from
right?
people.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, that separation gives you the strength to.
I already matter because I'm his.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's it.
It's about whose you are, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it really helps you to understand who you are when you understand whose you are. You know?
And now it makes it easier for you to choose friends.
Yes.
Which is the hardest part about being a teenager.
So hard. Yep.
And
It
even if you
is.
got bad friends, because I had friends in high school, and I knew who the drug dealers were.
Right.
And I had one guy, I talked to him all the time, and he was probably the biggest drug dealer there, and he got arrested several times. Never even crossed my mind to take the drugs.
Sure.
He never even offered them to me once because he knew who I was.
Yeah.
And just kind of what I stood up for.
Yep.
Not a single time did he ever offer them to me. And he had pockets full of stuff, and he'd sell the stuff. But he knew who I was, and he respected me because of it. So as a teenager, you can demand the respect and still be open and friendly to people, and just not live that life, not hang around them on the street corners
Yep.
and stuff like that, and just
Yep.
because I'm sure that I kind of drug him a little bit my direction every single time I was around him because of how strong I was there. And it all came from growing up with my belief in God.
This makes so much sense hearing your story because when I speak to youth in our community, it makes sense why they love you so much. And it really stood out to me. I've had many youth let me know that you attend their graduations.
Absolutely.
You attend every one of their graduations, and they
Absolutely.
funnel
We don't
in
miss
from
them.
many schools.
We don't miss them. Yep. We don't
That's
miss a single
amazing.
one. Yeah. It's a
So
blessing.
go back to your wife. So God knows everything.
Yes, he does.
Mom kind of got that impression.
Yep. Absolutely. So
What happened next?
So my wife, the neat thing about this is that it took her about 2.5 years before she would tell me that she forgave me. We were together, and even though this transformation is happening in me, she's watching it happen in real time. She's apprehensive because she's been hurt, right? She's seen me go to programs and
That's so
do better,
human. It takes time.
And I'll never forget, we went to a youth camp, and we came home, and a lot of times we'll give a testimonies on a Sunday and just let the church know what God did in the hearts of our kids and the people that are there. Well, my wife, and I would have never known this was going on in her because she didn't treat me bad. She just hadn't really forgiven me for what had happened. And she said, this year at camp, God helped me to forgive my husband. That's the first time I knew she had been wrestling with that, you know. But when he did, it was like everything just started coming to life, you know, in our life and in our ministry. And at this time, now I'm the youth pastor, right? This is what I'm doing. I'm not doing it full time like I am now. I'm working 2 jobs, and I got a little business on the weekend where I'm cleaning, and I'm serving here, and it's the highlight of my life, right, to do this as God is investing in it. Our youth ministry is exploding, and we have over 100 kids at this time. And then God brings an opportunity into my life to start a faith-based addictions program called Reformers Unanimous. We start this faith-based addictions program, and it just explodes. And we have over 100 people coming every Friday night, 52 weeks a year. It's got a 97% success rate. It blows all statistics out of the water, because when Christ is at the center, when we don't have to be afraid to talk about it or tiptoe around it. I'm going to challenge somebody. I think it's great to, if you got a focal point, a higher power, but that higher power needs to be somebody who can empower you to come out of this lifestyle. And for me, and in this program, we introduced them to the Lord Jesus Christ. And so it made all the difference in the world, man. And it got to the point where people were being court ordered into the program. And anyways, that's a long story. That'll take us a whole different direction. But we did that for 10 years. And finally had to let that program go because of circumstances in my life with my family, my kids growing up, and Friday nights, playing football, and really couldn't get anybody to take the load of what it takes to run a program like that on. It took 10 years of our life, and we're glad we invested it that way. But it was time for us to move on to something else. So that's what we did.
Well, that's a pretty big sacrifice for 10 years. But how many people do you think over 10 years went through that program?
I mean, thousands of people. And there's still people now we get a chance to, talk with. And there's people in our church that are there today. And there's people in our community that serve as counselors. And it's just amazing. Like, if you knew their backgrounds and where they came from, we actually did an egg hunt at our church last week. And there was people that had been in the program that were bringing their kids and just talking about how that impacted their lives and where they are today. And it's just exciting.
Well, it's got to be awe-inspiring. Because you take somebody who's like yourself, was totally deep into it, deep into drugs, and all of a sudden they come back and they got a wife, they got kids. Kids are growing up great. That is a life that has completely and 100% changed.
Absolutely.
But not only that, but it's affected so many other lives for generations now, and
so
you're just
so grateful.
the key to that.
I'm so grateful. It's been awesome to be a part of that. So. Going into ministry, I remember the first time my pastor came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about coming on full time, at the church?" And I'm like, "Is that legal? Like, are we allowed to do that?" I'm like, "Would the church go for that?" And he goes, "Yeah, I really think that we want to have you here full time and train you." And, of course, that would mean I'd be counseling and doing all different types of things at that point. So I had already been in Bible Institute for 6 years, and then, of course, adding some college in later on down the road. But made the decision to do that, and we've never looked back. I've been doing this full time.
What
with some
year was
extra
that?
jobs along the way. This was probably 6 years after I gave my life to the Lord in 1998. So, man, it's 2005, 6, right in that range.
Where were you September 11?
Wow, I was driving. To be honest, I was driving to Salt Lake City to pay a debt. So from the life that I lived, you write a check to get $25, a bad check to get $25, and it would turn into a bad check that had fees upon fees upon fees.
Oh, wow.
And I racked up probably $20,000 in bad debt. And I remember my pastor looking at me saying, "No, you're not going to file bankruptcy on this. You're going to pay every bit of it off." And I'm like, "Okay." And it took me that long. And I was driving down to Salt Lake City to pay. We're right there towards the end to pay one of my debts that we had accumulated. On September 11th. So I remember.
You heard it over the
vividly.
radio? Or?
Yeah, heard over the radio. And then when we got to the place I was at, there was a TV in there, and I can remember seeing it. And it was just, I'll never forget it. Never forget it.
Oh,
yep.
I remember mine too, because I worked evenings and was fast asleep. All of a sudden I get a call from my dad. "Did you see what happened on the TV?" I'm like, "No." Flip it on.
Yeah.
Flipped it on just in time to see the second plane hit.
Yeah.
Changes your
I'll
life.
never forget. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You?
I was had a morning show up while I was getting ready for work and just getting ready to leave, get the kids off to school. And so I saw it behind them. They had, they showed it. And then while they were showing it, you see the other plane coming in and you're thinking, what did I just see? It was really confusing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of ominous fear, like, is
This is real.
it?
Yep.
Is this what we've been waiting for all
Right.
these years going to happen to this country? And
Yep.
do I go to work? Do I send my kids to school? What do I do?
Yeah.
It's a crazy day.
Ominous. So you got into becoming a pastor like right out of teenage years.
Right.
Literally.
It feels like it, right?
Right out of
Basically.
teenagers, just molded right into it. You mentioned before the show started that you also got into the military with your dad. So how did that start?
So I didn't actually sign up to serve. I'm not in the military. How it started was just a couple years ago, somebody contacted me, was actually the previous mayor of Kaysville, and said, hey, I think you would do well serving up here on the base, working with these young airmen and the families that are here. Would you consider being an honorary wing commander? I'm like, sure. I didn't know what that meant, but as the door opened, it's just been incredible.
So what does an honorary wing commander do?
So an honorary wing commander is kind of like the bridge between the airmen and your local city. Utah's got so many misconceptions about what's here and what's not here, and people are afraid when they move into town, and they don't know what's out there. So it's my job to help them kind of assimilate or be a blessing to them in the community, just to help them connect while they're here. And that's the goal of the honorary wing commander, to help and to be there for them. But I'm a pastor, so it's been so much more than that, right? Because I can kind of act as a chaplain in a sense. I'm a chaplain for the Salt Lake City Police Department too as well, in that same capacity. So it's...
Do you find yourself helping a lot of the military youth?
I thought so. My wife and I, probably 6 years ago, started working with our college and career department too. So we've always worked with teens 7th through 12th grade. And we crossed over because we realized at 18 to 20 years old, there was we were losing kids, in that time period where people just don't know what they want to do with their life. And so we decided we would be a part of that bridge to help them make that transition. And so we took over that ministry too in our church. So they're with us now from the time they're in 7th grade until they're done with us. They might be 30 years old by the time they finish up college and career department and maybe move on into young couples class, they get married. So I thought, well, man, this is God opening up a door to really reach into these airmen. And we have had airmen come, and it's been amazing. But I realize it's really been more about the families for us and the leaders and being plugged in with the leadership. Everybody needs somebody that they can share with, that they can talk to, that they can connect with, that they can unload their burdens to. And a lot of time our military personnel, who you going to do that with? You're in charge. You know what I mean? Especially if you're a commander, if you're if you're over certain things, if you're a master sergeant, who are you going to come to and talk to? So I realized this has been more about connecting us with families there. And on the second round I'm getting ready to go through, I think that's what we'll really focus in on. Not that the airmen aren't important. They are. We have some great things planned for them, coming up in the future. We get a chance to serve them, Thanksgiving. I've had them in my house for Christmas and different things like that. But we realize families as a whole, they really need that kind of, I guess I would say, ministry, right? They need to be loved on and cared about and helped, so that's kind of what we're shooting for.
So again, just like you're growing up and helping all those kids, you just mold right into it and start helping the servicemen.
I'm excited about
The unique thing about Layton, and I love Layton, is when I first moved to Layton, and all of a sudden you have all the jets flying over. They're incredibly loud, incredibly loud. And I'm talking to my neighbors. I'm like, you guys get used to that? And they're like, used to what?
I know.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, going from the 16 to the 35 though.
10 years later, guess what? I'm like, yeah. You get used to it.
I work in Syracuse, so sometimes I'm calling my husband while he's in late, and he's like, just a second.
Yeah.
So he stops, and then I'm like, okay, now they're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I'm on the phone. I'm like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Just wait for the jet to fly over. You just keep on talking.
I love it.
It's
It makes me feel
sound,
safe.
though.
It's one of the coolest
sound.
things to ever
really
watch.
is. It
To
really
watch
is.
those things taking off, and
Yep.
sometimes they'll take off and just straight vertical. I mean, it's like an air show, 2-second air show, but it's cool to watch
awesome.
them every single time they
It
come
is.
in.
Yep. Special place. Layton is. It really is.
It's a lot of fun, and you get to be a part of that. Are
It's-
you on base a lot, or?
I'm on base as often as I need to be up there. But we get to travel, we get to go to Red Flag, to the military exercises, and our guys are deploying, and I'm going to go with them. I'll meet them there in August. Some of them are deploying pretty quickly.
Where are they deploying to?
They're going to, I think I can say it on here. They're going to Japan on this one, and I'm going to meet up with them in August.
So you get to go to Japan.
Yeah, I'm going to get to go to Japan and hang out with them. So it's
You-
good
you
just
a-
to help boost
you a
morale.
sushi guy?
Right? Oh, yeah. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
It's gonna be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, but
My
just
my
for
son
morale,
served in Korea, And he was always just texting me pictures of these huge platters of sushi and stuff like he'd eating. And then he'd show me how much it cost. I'm like, oh, if only, if only.
It's neat, but it really is about them, right? It's about really trying to meet their needs and hopefully build them up while they're there. And it's hard to be away from your family, hard to be away, there. And it's not like they're there having a vacation, right? They're working long, long shifts. And if there's a chance that they're involved in military activity, I should say, and all that stuff brings a lot of stress and pressure. So my job would be to go there and just to kind of help boost morale and encourage them and love
What
on
a
them.
great resource, and I'm sure their families appreciate you being there for them.
Do you have a lot of community interaction now with that position?
I do, yeah, I do.
So
It's been great.
who's your primary interaction with?
Well, right now with a lot of the leaders and
So like Layton City Mayor or
oh, you mean like in Layton City, in
or
the city
any of the
itself?
cities around Hill Air Force Base?
Yeah,
What's your interaction
So a lot
like?
of those people are honoraries. So we interact on the base together. We might be there serving a meal. We might be there running an activity together. A lot of our local mayors are plugged in on the base too and serving. So it is a lot of community leaders that are plugged in up there. There's also a group called the Falcons, and they're people that were honoraries before, and now they're Falcons, and they help out in a different capacity up there. And we all kind of work together, but it's neat. I mean, Vice President of Weber State, professors from the dean of this or that from Weber State, they're all plugged into these programs where we get a chance to serve our military. So
Yeah.
it's good.
So is it primarily just activities that you're doing with the servicemen, or
A lot of
what's your
activities,
main?
and so for me, so it might be counseling. It might be, hey, I need to go sit down and have lunch together, or that's.
So they just come
I
up to you and say this.
Yeah,
or that
kinda.
you're organizing your own
I've
activities.
had a
and
chance
stuff.
to speak to them, in groups. So whether it's their leaders or whether it's young airmen, and usually through that interaction, they'll get my number and reach out to me if they need something. So
That's
been
we know that they need it.
absolutely,
We know that they always need
absolutely.
it.
Yep.
And it's not always just because of PTSD or something like that. But again, they're away from their families for a long time.
Yeah,
It's pretty regimented, and people need that type of help all the time. Just
absolutely.
let me just talk it out.
Yep.
I'll probably feel better when I'm done. But
Yes.
who are they going to talk it out to? They're superiors or
Right.
sergeants. They're
It's
not,
hard to do the same thing with Salt Lake City PD or any police officer, right?
They got to be the tough guy the whole time. And who are they going to talk it out with?
And you're afraid if you talk to somebody that can impact your career, it's hard to do that. So to have someone who's not connected at all can help out a lot.
That's awesome. So how did that mold between you being a pastor now and all this into running for a state school board?
So a couple of years ago, and I can't even tell you, just through different circumstances, the Lord really impressed on me that he wanted me to run for public office. So I thought that meant like city council. I'm like, you got to start somewhere. You know what I mean? Let's start with city council. I wasn't thinking mayor or anything like that. And so I called my senior. First of all, I talked to my wife, and I shared it with her. We prayed about it. And it's like, well, if the Lord opens the door, we'll do that. And so I called the senior pastor, and I said, I think God wants me to run for public office. And he's like, well, then do it. You know what I mean? Whatever you feel like the Lord's leading you to do, do it. He's always been super supportive when it comes to this kind of stuff, knowing that anything I do might take me away some from what I'm doing, but he sees it all as ministry, right? It's not this, that's all ministry. So about a year went by, and I'm just hanging out, not really even thinking about it, but God knows I've said yes. I'll do this if you open the door. Well, Jamie Renda, I don't know if you know Jamie Renda from Path Forward, Utah. Mm-hmm. She calls me on the phone. I met her because she came to our patriotic service. By the way, we have an incredible patriotic service at our church every year. I think we had 42 elected officials there last year in our patriotic service, and it's a great chance for our pastor to just challenge our leaders and say, look, if you will stand with God, we'll stand with you. You know what I mean? We'll support you. We'll back you. We'll be there for you. And if you don't, we'll pray for you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But it's a powerful time. Anyways, I met Jamie Renda there for the first time the year before, and she had my number, and she called me and she said, hey, this position's open for the state school board. We really want you to consider running for it. Well, I was like, no. City council, right? That's like state school board. What are you talking about? That's way off my radar. In a million years, I would have never thought of that. And it was just pretty that frank. Like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. Well, she's persistent. If you know Jamie,
I'm glad she
She's
is
so
persistent.
persistent. So she had Joe Carey, which is a current state school board member, contact me. And I was actually in New York City, and we were on a survey trip for a mission trip that we were going to do in about 6 months, bring a whole group from the church there. And I was walking over the Brooklyn Bridge when Joe Carey called me. And he's just kind of talking to me about, the pros and the cons and the this and that, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know why he's wasting his time on this. I'm not doing this. And just as real as we are in this room, God just confirmed to me on that call. It wasn't even anything he said. It was just God, like, this is what you're supposed to do. And I can remember I was with this pastor and I was with my wife and this pastor's wife.
He was saying, look, you agreed to it a year ago.
Said, yes.
This is what you're
talking
doing.
about? Of course. And it was uncomfortable. And I mean, because I didn't know what I was walking into. And I got off the phone. I remember saying to them, I think God wants me to run for the state school board. And they looked at me like, I said, I think he does. I think he wants me to do it. So I got back home, and I can remember before I ever signed on anything, I had my family over. It was Christmas time. My sister, she was an administrator for years in schools, and she went from California here to Utah, and she's been in education. She's got the background for it. And I sit down, my family, my nephew's there. I mean, there's 20-something people in my house. And when I make the announcement that I'm going to run for state school board, and everybody was kind of quiet. You could tell they wanted to be supportive. My sister's like, what? What are you talking about, I'm like, I think this is something that God wants me to do. And so in January, I signed on. And listen, nobody can prepare you for what you're going to face once you do that. I signed on. Jamie shows up down there. She's taking pictures and she's videoing. And I'm thinking, is it that big of a deal? All I did was, I just signed up. Well, yeah, it's a bit. Now she starts telling everybody, okay? And invites me to my first event, which was the Lincoln Day dinner.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I got a banner. She's like, you need to have brochures. You need to have a banner. So we ordered all these things, and I get there, and I'm not prepared for the questions that people are going to start to ask me. I'm just not prepared. I'm not. I mean, it's not that I don't know anything about education. I actually have a degree in education, but I taught in a Christian school. But these questions were way out there, and I'm thinking,
you had no idea the unhappiness there was with the incumbent. Yeah.
I had no idea. So people are, and then they're surrounding me, right? And everyone's listening to see what my answers are. And I'm like, Lord, you got to give me wisdom. You know what I mean? You got to give me wisdom. But it helped us to understand I need to be prepared, and these are hot topics, and you guys know what some of them were, going through the
well, we're going to go over many of them today. That's the whole point of this.
But God really gave me grace, to answer, because I didn't have to make anything up, right? This is coming out of my heart. These are answers that are coming from my heart, and I'm starting to share these with people. And anyways, it just opened up a floodgate. And I want you to know I never asked for a single endorsement. I never went to somebody and said, can you endorse me? But we got over 20 endorsements from legislators and Mike Lee and Burgess Owens. People were reaching out to us. Hey, we'd like to endorse your campaign. We'd like to get behind what you're doing. And it just blew me away because I knew that it was God open up.
Well, you knew how bad of a need it was. I mean, it was a serious need.
It's huge.
School board, I think, is a lot of times more important than like a local mayor and stuff like that because it affects our kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I think God prepared you for it because I'm working with kids, coming from where you came from, it just set you up to understand what our kids and our teenagers are going through in school. And if you go into that from a place of understanding, when they hit you with the hard questions, you already know the answers.
Right. It's true. It's true. It just blew my mind. Like I wouldn't have played it out that way in my mind, right? I didn't imagine that that's what God was preparing me for. But my very first board meeting, I'm sitting in that, you almost feel like you have imposter syndrome, right? But the longer I sat there, I realized I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be in this room. This is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And God just kind of elevated that. And they asked me to be the majority caucus leader for the board. So we've never had a caucus with the state school board. The House and the Senate, they caucus together. And we have 13 Republicans on the board and 2 Democrats. So we have a chance to form this majority caucus and actually talk about issues together. Not that you want to keep anything off the public record, but there's some stuff we got to hash out together as a team and work through together so that we can have some continuity and head in the right direction, talk about some tough issues, and try to see things from one another's perspective. And the caucus allows us to be able to do that. So it was very difficult when we first started out because not everybody wanted to do it. This is a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. Well, it's not. We're allowed to do that. We're allowed to come together, and our Assistant Attorney General, she joins in on those meetings. But it's grown, and we have right now consistently 10 people that come to be a part of that caucus, and it's just been pretty neat.
Well, I think it's very important because we were talking about this
necessary.
last week that the Democrats tend to be very, very united. I mean, you see their bickering every once in a while on the news and stuff like that. The Republican side, though, it's like everything's out in the open. We bicker in the open.
Yep.
And then when it comes down to vote time, we still
I know.
don't come together as a
know.
body.
It's the truth.
It's good for you to go fight your fights. I like what Rand Paul is doing with the budget and stuff like that. But in the end, if you lost the fight in the back halls,
That's right.
it's time to buckle up and just
That's right.
accept the loss and pull together as a team.
Yep.
Because if we don't pull together as a team, we lose.
Yep. Yep.
We don't have enough votes to win anything.
So true.
And that type of back talking where you have that little caucus is necessary because that is mom and dad talking not in front of the kids, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's mom and dad talking outside of the way the kids, and so you guys can hash it out. Then should be able to come out with a consensus. This is where we're going to stand.
That's right. Yep.
And those who stand and stand firm win.
Yep. I agree. 100%.
If you still come out bickering and fighting and you guys can't come to a consensus, then we're just going to lose,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely. And that's kind of where we're. I mean, we had our first little, and I don't want to go into details about this because it's still kind of under wraps. We had our first little issue where people were doing stuff outside of the caucus and then just plopping it into the board meeting. Well, you're not going to, now you've caught everybody off guard, you know, and it's hot topics and big issues where we should have been able to hash this out in the caucus, you know what I mean? And so I think we're learning that this is going to be the best place to deal with some of those big issues so that we can.
As long as people's attitudes don't get in the way, right?
That's one of the things we laid out.
You
from
deal
the
with
very
pride,
beginning.
and
That's
I'm
it.
sure you
That's
you
it.
teach about pride
That's
in
it.
church. We learn about pride in church all the
Yep.
time, and if you can get the pride out of the way
That's it.
and say, look, it's not about me, it's not
That's
about
right.
you, it's what's best for the community.
Oh man.
Let's hash it out.
Yep.
Let's be aggressive. Let's throw out our stuff. But in the end,
Yep.
if you're losing the battle, buck up, swallow the pride, and just come together as a
Yes,
solid unit.
Absolutely. We talked about that. It's okay to be passionate, but you don't have to be ugly with each other. You know what I mean? We don't have to resort to name calling. You know, the Bible says, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. You can present things in a way where not everybody has to agree with you, but you don't have to cuss them out over it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And we can talk to each other in a gracious manner. So I think we're heading that way in our caucus, and I think you're going to see some great things come from it. We have to remember all this has taken time to get to where it is now in our system. And as people are waking up and realizing that, hey, maybe we have been going the wrong direction, you know, and maybe pulling some of these things out of our schools.
I
and
hope so.
replace them. I believe it. I believe it's beginning to happen, but it's not going to happen when we're yelling and screaming, right? I think we have to be able to have civil debate and a conversation where somebody's actually willing to come to the table and listen to you. And when we're calling each other names and stuff like that, it just defeats the purpose. So I hope and pray as a party that we'll begin to realize that, because we do wait. No one person knows more than all of us, right? We need each other to come together and to work together. And there's so much power and synergy, right, when we're coming together. But I think the devil knows these little tiny things, and some of them are
You
small.
split people up,
That's exactly.
they fall.
Yep, divide
it
and
happens
conquer,
every single
man.
time.
Divide and
Because
conquer.
if the Republican vote splits, it's just more on the left.
That's right.
That's all it is.
That's right.
You're not helping our side. You're not helping any of the causes. You're helping the other side.
Yeah.
Trevor Lee was on last week.
I
And
was
we
just
talked
thinking
about
that.
that.
Okay.
How there's a lot of congressional people that says if the bill isn't perfect, burn it to the ground.
If I can't have everything I want,
Yep.
Burn
Can't
it
do
to the
that.
ground.
then I'm not
Can't
playing.
do that. Yeah.
And I made the specific comment that instead of trying to go for the home run every single time, hit the base hit, take what you can, and then
Build upon it.
build upon
How
it.
do you think we got Roe v. Wade overturned?
Yeah.
little by little,
Little by little.
That's exactly.
But
how
that's
it
what the
happened.
Democrats do as well. So they and this is what we're going to talk about today is how they piecemeal everything. 20 years ago, the discussions about men and women's sports, about all the pornography in our libraries, all about the LGBTQ emphasis in schools and the gender dysphoria, the sex mutilation, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. That just didn't pop out on the scene.
Right.
It was you have to accept these people.
Yep.
Then it was about gender pronouns, and they just took it a step at a time.
Sure.
And it's like on our side, we don't like taking baby steps. We want all or nothing.
Right.
And all or nothing doesn't work. And I've never understood that philosophy amongst our legislatures. It's never going to be all or nothing. Take the small wins
I agree.
and build on it.
I'll tell you something that just happened. I think I can talk about this now, and I don't think it'd be offensive to anybody else involved. But we had and you can go and look, if you want to do some background research on this, you can go look from our last board meeting. But we had a proposal, if you would, come out to really combat some of the DEI that we're still seeing in some of our schools. Well, this resolution that was put together, it kind of morphed into something that I wasn't okay with, because I really feel like the way that you put things out to the community, it has to be on the bottom shelf. People need to know what we're talking about. You can't be so academic. It can't be so high level that people have to go get a dictionary, you know what I mean, to figure out what we're talking about. And when it came to the way it was presented, and I'm not saying anything bad against the person who put it together, I would never mention their name. It just was abrasive. To me, it wasn't clear, and this is how I know it wasn't clear. I got hundreds of emails thinking it was something it wasn't, thinking we were attacking people with disabilities, thinking that we were attacking unified sports, thinking that we were attacking all these different things. And really, my heart was that, hey, I don't want one race elevated above another in our schools. We don't. There doesn't need to be any sort of race baiting or weaponization of race in our schools. Let's stop focusing on all the things that our differences. Let's focus on the things that bring us together, you know what I mean, as a community, and focus on those things and move forward. And we've got laws in place already, right, that deal with DEI. Let's adhere to those, and let's move forward and find the things that we can focus on together. Well, this letter or whatever it was, this resolution didn't say that, but I committed from the very beginning that I was going to stand with it, vote with it. Man, I'm telling you what, I took a black eye for that one. I really did, and it affected and impacted our board in a powerful way. We had people coming out of the woodwork thinking it said something it didn't say. It wasn't very clear. And it's one of those issues where I know we want to make a strong statement, but it's got to be made the right way, right? I'm a communicator, right? That's what I do every week as I communicate. I'm a pastor. And when I read that, I thought, this is not going to be good. This is going to be really, really bad. And against all advice, it still went forward and went into the public. And I think as a board, it hurt us a little bit. I'm not going to say a lot. It hurt us a little bit. I think our community needs to see us be able to come together. And we had an opportunity to do this right and to do it together. And so I hope as we move forward into a situation like that again, that we'll do it right. We'll do it together. Wording is everything, right? Messaging is everything.
Well, sometimes I think a lot of legislators need like a professional writer.
I know.
I mean, the president has a professional speech writer.
Yes.
Sometimes the legislator needs
Right.
a professional, because they put stuff out, and you're like, what?
I know. The way we say it, right, is everything.
And you could get so much done if you just improved the English language a little bit and described a little bit more, put some effort into it, put a little heart into it.
That's right. That's right.
A lot of times they just want to be stern and firm and solid.
Yep.
You can still be firm, stern, and solid, but put some detail and put some adjectives in there and stuff like that and describe what you're doing. So
yep.
That's
layman
so
out in the field
interesting.
understands it.
I've never thought of it from that perspective, but now a lot of things were running through my mind, that things that I was surprised in over the past, in years, not just recently, but I can see how that can be an issue.
Well,
and we do need to make it more layman
Oh, you do.
terms.
The deal is, I mean, okay, yeah, you might be able to find some DEI, like some Marxist roots in DEI. We know this stuff, right? Because we study these things. But the general public doesn't know that. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, communist, what are you talking about? They have no idea. So immediately they get offended. And whatever it is that in their mind that they think you're talking about, that's what you're talking about now, whether you are or not. And so,
Well, not only that, but the other side tends to twist it that direction
you
too.
know it.
The news
Absolutely.
media is way left leaning.
Yep, let's play off of this
They
now.
will twist that and make it sound more and more like that,
man.
and it's
The phone
horrendous what
calls,
they
the
do.
emails. I mean, you know what? I took them all because I voted for it because the principle, right, that was there. And plus, I gave my word. The Bible talks about a man that swears to his own hurt. Mm-hmm. But I would have preferred if we could have brought that into caucus and worked on it, and we could have wordsmithed that and made it so much better and communicated the point. Not every school still has DEI in it, but it makes it sound like you're addressing every school in the whole state. There's still some of that stuff still floating around, and we just wanted to make a statement. Hey, we agree with what President Trump said here about DEI. We don't want it in our schools. We want to unify around the right things and not be divided by race. That's what we wanted to be able to say, but it didn't come off that way. So it's a learning experience, right? I'm ready to move on from that. I think the people involved are ready to move on from that and do something productive that can resonate with people. And I think that's what people need to say, hey, this board's working together, man. They want to do some things together.
So when you go get an author, someone who's written a few books, and say, hey, I need you to come write something for me.
Right. And the people that were behind it, and we worked on it together, but the people that were really behind the language there meant well. And they understood what they were saying. It just left.
Well, the problem is a lot of times they understand in their own head.
That's right. Yeah.
And they get, that's relayed. I relayed that, right?
Yep.
And no.
I think the heart behind it was right. It just wasn't the right execution.
Yeah, you didn't relay it right. So as you started your campaign, kind of tell us how campaigns start. Because you're starting from scratch.
Starting broke.
That was what I was going to say. The first thing about a campaign is fundraising.
Yes, yeah.
So how'd the fundraising start? How'd the whole thing start?
You know what? As people got behind us, it just started flowing in. And then one of our ladies that's on the state school board now, she said, "Why don't you do something called 100 from 100? Put it on Facebook and ask 100 people if they'd be willing to donate $100." What we did, but we said it didn't have to be 100; it could be anything, and it just blew up. And that's how we really raised a lot of our money the first half of our campaign. The hardest part is when primaries are over, right? And everyone feels like you won. And so we were able to kind of build and raise money. It was great. The donors came out of the woodwork, and it's just awesome. Just poured in because they knew what we needed. We need, holding.
Well, the issue with this state is we're so Republican that the primary is it. Usually, if you have an R behind your name, and you're in the general, you're going to win. Unless you're in downtown Salt Lake, you're going to win. So most of us, not me, particularly not me, most people in general, he won the
Check
primary,
out.
he's good.
Yeah. So, but the lady I ran against, she's sharp. She was actually a great lady. She's part of a moderate party called the Forward Party. And if you went to our debate, we hardly had any differences, and that's what was scary is that we hardly had any differences between us, and maybe deeper than maybe going a little deeper, you might find some things, but on the surface level, the questions that were asked, I'm like, hey, if we're supposed to pull this thing out, I need some help, guys. Like we still got to advertise, we still got to have signs, we still, there's many things we need to still do to pull this off, and of course the Lord pulled it off. It turned out fantastic. I can't remember what our percentage was, but
Huge.
It was huge.
Did she support you once you had won?
Yeah, she's actually great. She's
That's
great. She
what
still
I thought I'd
calls and
heard.
she still wants to get together because she still wants to have, she still wants to have some influence in the education space. And she's a tremendous lady. She really, truly is. And I think if it would have been her, she would have done a great job too as well.
But then you had the next hurdle.
Which one? Tell me which one. Which one?
Brent Strait.
Yeah. So Brent Strait was on the top, on the front end. And I'll never say anything negative about Brent Strait. To this day, I would love to have him, as a friend and acquaintance, somebody that, I can see him in the street and shake his hand, but he's never contacted me since we won, and it got kind of heated, and it really didn't need to.
I don't think they expected the kind of you came with cheerleaders.
It was great, and he.
Well, I know for a fact because I'm a state delegate. My son's a state delegate. She's
I'm
a state delegate. I'm also a county delegate, so I'm both. And the second that I heard your points, I was sold. It was instantaneous. I'm like, no, he's it. It didn't take much at all because we all knew straight and we knew all the other people in there. And they're not bad people like you're saying, but
Right.
they didn't have that rigidity on our principles. They
Right.
would
What they were
bend.
allowing to happen wasn't acceptable to
bend.
parents.
Their philosophy was, well, let's negotiate, let's meet in the middle. And I'm
Right.
like, there's certain things that you can't
That's
negotiate
right.
on.
You
They're
gotta take a strong stand
non-negotiable.
on. I agree 100%.
There's other things, yeah, we can negotiate on, but you're negotiating on everything. And
Right.
stuff in our school, stuff in there's certain principles, morals, and values that we have to have that you cannot bend on, and they would bend on it all because they're just trying to be nice. And that's what we were talking about in the very, very first podcast that we did. Is there's a noticeable difference between the God in the public spaces before Trump and afterwards.
Right.
There's a noticeable difference between people who are willing to talk about Trump before his election and afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it all comes down to people standing up for their morals and values. Whether you're a Christian, you're Jewish, you're, like I said, a conservative Muslim, it doesn't matter what religion you're from. If you're, like I said, LDS Mormon, if you're another group, if you're evangelical, you're Southern Baptist, I don't care what it is. We all have certain morals and principles that we need to stand up for. And you can't let the public sway you from that. You can't say, well, I'm going to be nice, I'm going to fit in.
Yep.
Because that goes
Gotta
back
stand
to
on
what
principle.
you were experiencing in high school, right?
Yes.
With peer pressure.
Yes.
You all of a sudden now the peer pressure is swinging on your decision-making process and you're not standing up for morals and values.
Right.
When it's God-fearing, the morals and values come first. And what we specifically noticed was before Trump was elected, people would say, oh, yeah, I'm Christian. And it would end there. They wouldn't really praise God or praise Jesus or really talk about upstanding morals and values. They were afraid to say, I'm a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
They're afraid. And all of a sudden, when everybody saw the popular vote came out, and all of a sudden they saw that it was the in thing, it was popular, all of a sudden, oh, if everybody else is standing for it, I'm going to stand up for it, right? If you're not afraid to talk about Jesus, I'm going to talk about it, right? If you're not afraid to talk about Trump. And my comment has always been is, why did it take everybody seeing the popular vote to get to that point?
I think the media makes people feel like they're the minority in this situation. And you're right. A lot of people cower back in fear, you know, and sometimes it takes a strong leader like President Trump, right? Coming out and kind of ripping all the covers off of what's been going on, and you get a chance to see we've been deceived. Like, we are the majority. You know what I mean? The way that I feel is the way that most people feel around me, and it empowers them, right, to do it. And I'm not giving them any excuse for not standing up before that, because it does.
Well,
it
that's
takes
what
a
I'm
boldness.
saying is that I'm glad it did.
Right.
Because it took a strong leader like Trump to get that out of people.
Right.
And I'm so glad that did, because the direction we were going, we would have been devastating, because the moral degradation of society was in a path that was sinking and sinking fast.
Big time.
And it wasn't just socialism and communism coming into our political life. It was just the straight up morals of society was just falling like a rock.
Yep.
And it should not take that type of in-your-face thing to all of a sudden, I'm going to stand up for my morals and values.
I agree with you 100%. But it does sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think it should take that, but it does. And I'm thankful for people, and hopefully they'll maintain this boldness as we move forward. We don't know. I mean, I would love to believe our nation is on a trajectory where we will stay headed in the right direction, but it's up to us, right? It's up to us. And sometimes some people, they that we're standing, we're like, oh, no, we haven't done it yet. You know what I mean? We're still doing it right now. The fight is still worth fighting right now, and we can't stop. We have a couple years, right, before we get a chance to maybe look at a whole new transition in the House and in the Senate. We can't lose that. We have to continue to fight. So hope that.
Well, I'm afraid too is people say, "Oh, Rod's in there now. We're good."
Yeah, we need prayers more than ever before right now.
It's on his shoulders now. He'll take care of it.
Now the fight
and then
begins,
people
right?
stop being involved, right?
Yeah. I mean, the state school board, we are given oversight and control, and so my constituents believe that we can do something about it. And the hardest part for me stepping into the board was realizing I don't think people believe we can do anything about this. There's a lot of control with staff. There's a lot of control with different areas that we should have the control. And so it's been a change in a way of thinking. There's some people that have been in there before me that have begun to lay the groundwork. Now it's time to begin to execute. They've planted those seeds, right? And they fought some hard battles, and they stood in some times where it was just them standing, and now it's time to fight. And I want to encourage them that we can do this. I think sometimes you've been doing that for 4 years, and you've been defeated, one vote after the next. You don't believe some of the people that were a part of that can change. I believe different. I think that God can change anybody. The change has to come from the inside out. We pray together in our caucus meetings. We prayed together before our board meeting. It was just awesome to have a
That's great to
large
hear.
chunk of the board in there praying together because we realized we need God's help. And so we need God, period, not just a little help. You know what I mean? We need God to take over. And it's
Well,
gonna
that's what I was hoping would happen is when I saw prayer go back into the White House when they had their first cabinet meeting and they had that prayer, then I was like, God's back in the White House.
Yeah,
That's
right.
heartwarming.
Absolutely.
And we got comments on that God's not supposed to be there. You're forcing it on top of people. I'm like, if you don't believe God, just back off.
That's right.
But just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you can take that away from everybody else.
Yeah.
If you don't want to participate in a prayer, then just stand back and just let everybody do their thing. It's not hurting you. It's just words. It's not hurting you in any way. Just let it be. But the problem I see happening out there is when people see something that is moral, that is right, that is God-fearing particularly, it makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
They get this little knot in their chest. They get this little weird feeling. I'm just not comfortable in this environment.
Yeah.
And the next thing they're doing is because I'm not comfortable, I have to knock it down. This is not good for me. It's not good for the public. You're pushing this on me. And they get that attitude. You're pushing it on me. I'm feeling claustrophobic in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not it. It's the good feeling. They just want to knock it down. And what's causing that? It's Lucifer. It's the other side that's putting that in their heart. That's just saying that
it's the truth.
You're feeling uncomfortable with this. But we as Christians around that need to stand up and say, I understand you're uncomfortable in this situation. We're nothing but love.
That's right. And I think
I'll make you as comfortable as possible, but I'm not going to back down off my morals and principles. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Yep. Yeah, I think you can do all of that in the spirit of love, right? And I think it's when we are condemning and when you play into what the other side is expecting you to do, that it really kind of upsets the cart on those types of things. So I think especially as believers, those of us that know the Lord, we better act like it. You know what I mean? And love people in spite of people. Even when they're being mean, we don't return that. We put it in God's hands. It's amazing. It's amazing when you submit to the Lord in that area and just let His light shine through you. It's powerful how you can tear down those walls in people's life and they get a chance to see light and love in a way that they've never seen it before. It makes a huge impact.
Huge impact. But I want to make a play off of that because we just went to the county Republican convention there. And I was walking out of the building because I had to go to another event. And this older lady came up to me and said, what do you think of that? What do you think? And I was just making her comments about my belief system and why I was there and stuff like that. And she goes, well, I was so nervous about Trump. I didn't vote for him the first time. I really hates the way he does things. I can't stand the way he opens his mouth. And I'm like, I get the whole anti-Trump thing because of people are just so standoffish of the way he verbalizes things. Mm-hmm. And I always say there's a stark difference between before assassination attempt and after because he really went God-fearing afterwards. Yeah. But I told her, I says, look, the other side is not going to back down. She says, well, I can't stand all the bickering and fighting. We just got to peacefully come together with the other side. I'm like, that is never, ever, ever going to happen.
Right.
The first thing you got to recognize is the other side is never, ever going to back down. They're always going to be vilifying us. They're always going to be attacking. They're always going to be lying about stuff, exaggerating stuff. But most importantly, their attitude, their aggressiveness, the anger, the vitriol that's going to come across in their voice, the sheer attacks, that's never going to stop. There's no time in which that is going to be cordial.
Right.
Or you're going to have just a normal discussion. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So just get that out of your head. That's never, ever going to happen. That's gone.
Right.
Okay? So now all you can do is look at our side. And I said this specifically to her. So now just look at our side. So if I go up against something that is that abrasive, that attack oriented, and I'm a puppy, I'm going to get steamrolled, and no one's going to ever listen to me ever again. It's just the way it's going to happen.
Right.
Trump came out as a lion, and that's what this country needed, because the only way you can attack what's coming from the other side is to be just as aggressive.
Right.
So you may not like the way he expressed himself because you've got a little more conservative of an outpoint and you don't like the verbiage, but that's what the country needed because that was the only thing that was going to win.
Right.
That was it. You can't come out and fight fire with
I know. Yeah.
with a cotton ball because the cotton ball is going to catch on
That's
fire.
right, every time. Yeah. It's the truth.
And that's why I feel like was what people want to be. So you get all these anti-Trumpers and they're out there trying to fight fire with a cotton ball.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work.
Right.
So and she's like, I never really thought about it like that. And I'm like,
It's true.
it's the aggressive side. You can be nice about it, and sometimes he's not very nice, but you've got to come at it a little bit sterner, or they're just going to roll over to you. And what happens if we get rolled over? All these morals and values that we stand for Christians, they're gone.
Yep. Yep.
And before you know it, not only the morals and values gone, but then our free agency is gone.
That's right. Those are the foundation, right?
Socialism is going to be coming in, and it's going to be, like Ben Carson said in our first thing, it's going to be cradle to the grave. We're going to take care of you. We're going to tell you what to do. I just listened to another podcast with Sean Ryan that we're probably going to use up here in a couple of months. So about a gentleman that immigrated from Poland to here during the early 90s, late 80s. And at that time, Poland was heavy socialist. And he was a fighter. He was putting out leaflets about anti-socialism, stuff like that, and got arrested, thrown in prison. His dad was a heavy socialist party member, left his wife and kids because they were Christian, going to church, and the party, you couldn't be a member of the party if you went to church. The one comment he made was, the socialist dogma, they can't stand religion because you esteem something that is not the party as a higher source of power. And if the party's not the source of power, then they can't control you.
Wow.
And he said that. And he wasn't. He says, I'm not very Christian. He says, I'm turning to be Christian. But he says, but that's how the party works.
Yeah.
Is they cannot have a religious society. It won't work. Because if you esteem a higher authority, a higher power, then you can't be controlled. The party's not the most important thing. And in the socialist and communist mindset, the state is the most important thing. The state becomes the religion, and that's what's controlled. And it's amazing because he started talking about how many people get arrested and thrown in prison. And it took the Pope coming up there to get the prisoners out.
Wow.
And the Pope went up there and got like 500 something like these political prisoners out during that time. And then they had this little revolt, and they got rid of the socialism in late 90s, almost 2000. It took them to get rid of socialism. So it's been recent.
Right.
And then he immigrated to the United States, and he said he was so grateful for everything he had. He had his little reading apartment. He was working as a janitor, and he says, and I didn't care because I was free man. Right. But the passion that he had and the love he had for this country was amazing. And he says, I have to thank this country. And he became a Navy SEAL.
Wow.
Just so he could go out and serve the country. He says, I have to pay my debt back to society.
That's awesome.
But I think the other side loses that, where the great Satan, the great sinner, is the country itself. It's us.
Right.
And then they don't understand that the country's made of people. And people aren't perfect. None of us are. And there's one perfect person. We know who he was.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So stop looking at our past and saying, well, we were slaveholders. We put Japanese in concentration camps and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, and it was run by people.
That's right.
People who are afraid, people who are greedy.
Yep.
Because it was more about the money than it was about anything else. But when you bring race into it, which I hate,
me too.
it's not about the race. It's about the power that they can wield with it.
Absolutely.
Because if they have a problem, if they create the problem, they can use the problem to gain political power, influence, money.
Yep.
And if the problem's not there, then they're not there. There's no need for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they always have to keep race out there. That's why they always have to keep.
It's a way to divide, right?
It's a
Well,
way to
and
divide.
I'll add on
Yep.
to that gender because I'm not important because I'm female. All these things like, oh, we have to, empower women. Well, we need to empower people.
Right.
Not me just because I'm a woman. And by saying that, you're saying that I am naturally less than, therefore I need to be empowered. And I'm not, my worth doesn't come from being a woman. My worth comes from being a daughter of God.
Yep.
That's where it's me that needs to learn my own worth. You don't enable my worth because you empower me to go for a ride in a spaceship or
Yeah,
whatever.
well, Satan wants to divide us. God wants to unite us.
That's right.
And that division causes a power struggle, and that's where the other side gets the power. It's not about race at all. It never has been.
Right. Yep.
Never ever has been. It's a tool
It is.
for power and money.
Yep.
So getting back to your side of things, so you're raising all these funds.
Yeah.
Now, kind of tell me about all of a sudden you're going to all these convention meetings and all this kind of stuff, and your crowds
Man.
of
And you
us
know what?
delegates like us just
I don't know if it's like that all
How'd
the
you-
time. But
how'd you deal
this
with-
time was
It's not, but
awesome.
we as
It was-
delegates, the chatter, we were just so excited to have a principled person running.
Well, it was
How'd you deal
incredible
with
experience. I
that
did enjoy
onslaught
it.
of people.
Well, I would first of all, my clothes were soaked in sweat because they were all around you. I'm serious, and you're nervous, and everyone's asking you questions, and they're in rows, like it was quite an experience. But I loved it. I really did. My wife and I, it almost like energized you for the next one and for the next one and for the next one, to go, because you start to hear what's on people's hearts, what they're most concerned about. I had a principal call me on the phone and say, I went online and I watched your video, and I want you to know and this is not derogatory against Brent Strait, I had a Brent Strait sign in my yard, and I went and took it down today, and I want you to know you have my full support. Just mind-blowing, because she grasped, just in that short video, my heart, and she knows the issue. She's been this person's been a principal for years and worked in the education industry for years, and understands that these are real issues that we're facing today, and that, hey, maybe we can make a turn and do something different here. So
You made a comment about staff, and I've had another school board member tell me sometimes it's the staff we have to win over. And she said, even in your election, she says, once staff members started seeing, they came around, and she goes, and it's really their support you have to have.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, and is that
well
appropriate?
well we have 400 staff members at USBE, and it's a big deal that you get the buy-in of the staff, and I don't, first of all, I want to say this. I'm excited to work with our staff. I'm excited for them to catch our heart and our point of view. I don't know how they've seen things in the past. Matter of fact, what they've done before is what they've done before. And I just want to be able to leave that back there. And I want to talk about what we're going to do as we move forward together as a team. You really do need to get the buy-in of the staff. They help write policy, but this is a part-time job for us, right? It's supposed to be 3 days a month, and so we don't have time to do a lot of these things. So the more they can glean from us where our hearts are and the direction that we want to see our education system go. One of my biggest criticisms from my opponent was, all you're doing is pointing out problems. I said, no, I'm shining the light on the issues. If we want to pretend like they're not there, like they don't exist, like this is not a problem, then we'll never address it so we can come to solutions. I believe it's going to take all of us to come together to be able to create solutions to make the change that needs to be made there. And so our staff is a big part of that. And right now, many of you know we're getting a new superintendent in our school. So right now, that whole vetting process is taking place. That person is going to be the most pivotal person, really, with that board, because they're supposed to help us with oversight and control when it comes to what happens in our education system. This person's going to carry out to our staff what it is that we want. And so maybe it's been different than that before in the past,
It's
right?
hard to hear as a delegate because you think you're beholden to me. I elected you. Those are not elected officials.
That's why it's important that our voices are heard. We have been engaging with our legislators on a level that it sounds like to me hasn't been done before. And staff members would make their way up to the Capitol and speak on behalf of the board. Well, you can't speak on my behalf. You haven't consulted me first. It should be me at the table having these conversations with our legislators that are making these laws, because ultimately I'm held accountable for that. Our constituents don't care that a staff member went up to speak. They want to know what I said. And so there's a shift, right, that's beginning to take place. And I'm not saying our staff members are not incapable. Maybe even in some of those conversations, they need to be there because they know more about the issue. They have the data, all the things that are necessary to bring into that conversation. But ultimately, it needs to come from me or one of the other elected board members, because we will be held accountable for those decisions that are made. Oversight and control. This is a big deal to me. Number one, before God, I'm held accountable. And then number two, to our constituents. They voted us in to do a job. And so it's important that we're at the table in these conversations. We're doing the job. So.
I don't want you pulling out and demeaning of your staff members, but have you seen any DEI or particularly woke type of mentalities within the staff?
I think when we say DEI,
I'm more woke. I mean, more of that woke personality within the staff members. What the federal government would call the deep state. Are you seeing any of that
I'll
in
say
there?
this. I think a lot of our staff members have had these views, right?
Progressive views.
Ideologies.
In the past. But let me say this, because they thought there was a lot of good there, not understanding the underlying, the whole position is that it would bring division, that it would bring. So when I say, I know what I mean when I say DEI. When I say, just those words sound so great, and I understand that they're not. Like, there's no diversity of thought, right? Equity, you can't even find that in your own house. You can't have equal outcomes in your own home with your own kids, let alone in a school environment. You can't. And so the only way you can get it is to lower the bar, and people don't want to believe that that's what's happened, but we've lowered the standards, we've lowered the bar, we have no expectation. It's killed the resilience with our kids. It's hurt their characters. It's been a great injustice, but many people believe it was in the spirit of helping, right? So I'm not going to condemn them because they thought they were doing a good thing. When it comes to inclusion, everyone's included unless you have a different point of view. If you don't agree with what everybody says in this group, you're not included, and that's not true inclusion. These words sound great, but it's been very destructive in our school system to incorporate those things along the way. So, yeah, I think some of them have bought into some of those.
How about that progressive, left-leaning, woke type of mentality? Have you had to route out some of that, or?
Well, I've just been there for 3 months so far. So we've had our 4th meeting, and even. This is the way my heart works, and this may not be the solution, right? There may have to be a harder solution, but what I would like to see is for people to come around and to see things the way that we see them. Like, hey, maybe they're right about that. Maybe we have broken down some things in the system, based on these ideologies that we've allowed to come in. Maybe this isn't the best thing for our kids. That's my heart.
You would hope,
right?
You'd
I
hope,
know.
but there's some people there
that's just my heart. That's how my heart works.
And I'm afraid that's not going to work.
Right? It may not, but that's why we need the right superintendent in there too as well. That can align with those things, because they're going to find
there's going to be staff members that want the pride flag everywhere, that want all this other stuff in there, and
sure.
there's no convincing them not to do that.
I agree.
And you may squash it and occult it, and they'll go into hiding with their
I
personal
don't know.
opinions.
I have that faith too, that people can change, and people, like you said,
come
there
around.
are some people who do it out of the.
I think
They
a
really
few
believe
people
in
will
it.
change.
They're not like the upper, deep state that
I've
knows
watched
darn well
happen,
it doesn't
right?
work.
I've watched it happen, but it does take time for that to take place.
You'll have a few that might change.
Yeah.
There's gonna
I
be
believe
some
God's in
hardliners
charge
there.
of this country,
Yes.
and I believe ultimately He will win. His way will
I
win.
think there's a tsunami of change that's coming. You know what I mean? And I think it's building. It's beginning to build, and I think that God's positioning people in the right places. And I think as the cover's being ripped off of what's been going on behind the scenes, and that there's light shining into the dark places, and we're seeing like, oh my goodness, this is way worse than we thought it was, or way deeper than we thought it was, or there was ulterior motives, and wow, this really is rooted in communism or Marxism, and we've adopted these principles and doctrines, right, into our schools, not just our K through 12, but our higher ed. Like it has infiltrated our higher education system too as well. And as people are waking up to this stuff, I'm telling you, it's cultivating a spirit of change. Like, we need to make make a change. So either people are coming on board or they're fleeing. You know what I mean? They don't want to have anything to do with it. So.
Oh yeah, we don't even want to get started with higher
Yeah,
education.
yeah.
'Cause we could go all night with how bad our
yeah,
universities
we know,
are.
We know.
So, one last thing before we start getting into some of these really deep topics that we're going to discuss with is you inundated with all these people, and then it comes election day. So, what was the heart like when you know the vote's happening right now?
Yeah.
Election results are coming in. What's I mean, we haven't run for office. What's
Yeah.
that feeling like?
I don't think you can describe it. And for me, it was like, okay, Lord, whatever happens is what you want. Like, if I'm not supposed to be in there, please don't allow me to take a step in that direction. I mean, it's already, we're already overwhelmed with everything we're going through now. I need you. Like, if I'm supposed to do this, open the door. And so I think the first results in the primaries came out of Weber County, and he was ahead. He was ahead in those results. And I thought, well, you know, whatever the Lord does here, and this was before Davis County came out. And of course, and it was, I don't know why it was so delayed. Something happened in the systems and everything. I don't know if you guys remember that night on primary night. Everything was delayed, and we didn't know what was going on. And finally, when those results came up, I mean, it showed us ahead by quite a bit, you know. And
Landslide at Davis
yeah,
County.
it was just overwhelming, you know.
Trust
the
me, I was one of the guys out there pushing. I was pushing hard.
Well, what was neat, we had, I think Carrie Ann Lisenby was there, Representative Lisenby. Yeah. Katie Hall was at our place with us. Tina Cannon was there. Like, all these folks we were all together that night. It was pretty neat to kind of go through that process together. But Trevor Lee was there. It was a really good time. You can't really explain it. You know, you can't put it into words. It was exciting, and I realized, okay, I think maybe God really does.
Describe
want me to do
the moment that you knew.
Man, thankful and still scared at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, okay, here we are, but now what's to come?
Tell me, where were you at? What were you doing when?
You mean at the church when I found out?
Wherever you were at.
We were at the church. We had a big
final tally came in.
Party.
What were you doing?
We had a big party, so there was a couple hundred people that were there, and we're all praying and waiting. And you know, people are finding out before me. On that the initial release, there was some of the people's numbers were up so high, we knew it was going to be a win for them. But just everyone's in limbo. We were excited. It was exciting. I guess that's the best word I can.
Did you hear it on the news? Someone come walk up and tell you? How did you find out?
I was talking to somebody when we had it on big screens. They pointed, look at the screen. I looked up, and then you could see it. It's like, you know, everybody goes wild, and it was exciting. It was good. It was good.
What time of night was that?
I don't even remember. So
I was so stressed out and checked out that night.
For the primaries, it was it must have been 9 o'clock or so. 10,
I thought it was pretty early.
Yeah, something like that.
It wasn't midnight.
And then for the general election, I think it was still pretty late, right? We had some stuff going on for general election which pushed out it messed up some of our districts hadn't come in yet. Some of our
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Okay.
No.
It was good. It wasn't out of the gate. It wasn't clear either because we were waiting on so many results to come in from other places too. So
were your boys
exciting.
there?
What's that?
Were the boys there?
Yeah. Yes.
What did they think about all this?
You know,
how old are they?
They're always so.
They're excited. They are. So
how old are they first? So everybody knows.
So I have a 14-year-old, 17-year-old, 23-year-old boy, and then I got two girls, 24-year-old and a 19-year-old. My 19-year-old wants to go into politics, so she's been, I mean, all in from the get-go. Yeah, and my kids have always been super supportive, and I can't help but think my younger ones are like, great. Not only is my dad my youth pastor now, but now he's a state school. Like, he's going to know everything I'm doing all the time. I mean, you know, so there's some of those things they carry, but they're also excited about what's happening. It's been really good. It's been really
that's
good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
They still have to be pretty proud of Dad.
Yeah,
You're
I
in
think
everything
so.
now.
I think so. They're excited. They're pretty involved in everything that we do. So it's been good.
Any marriages or grandkids yet?
So I have two grandkids. My oldest is married. He's 27. My oldest son is 27, and I got two grandbabies. We were just with them yesterday, and they're beautiful.
Aren't they the best?
Oh, it's the best. It's the best.
I'm not a grandpa yet. My younger brother beat me to that, so and I make fun of him for that because he's younger.
You know what? I couldn't have. Until you experience it. There's just nothing like it. You know, I couldn't have imagined it to be as good as it is, to be honest with you.
That's great.
Yep.
All right, let's get into it here. So, first off, we've got a lot of polls. I went through a lot of polls on how our education system's doing here in Utah. And there's a couple polls that had us at 13, one at 15, one that had us at like 39. I didn't believe that poll. The one that was the most deep was U.S. News, had us at number 2 in both education, and we're one of the worst in how much we were paying our teachers, and now we're pretty mid-range because we finally got those raises towards the teachers and stuff like that. And this is just recent. Give me your opinion on where Utah ranks in our school systems amongst the 50 states out there.
So I think we have to decide, what do we think about our school system as a whole, right? First, nationwide. And, you know, I'm sure you guys saw the story about the young lady that just graduated. I can't remember the state now. I wish I would have researched it better, but she just graduated. She's illiterate. She got a scholarship to college. And she can't even read. Yeah, I'm like, but this is the kind of stuff. So because we work with young people that are in transition from high school to college, we realize a lot of them don't read very well. A lot of them don't have durable skills. They don't do simple math very well. It's just, it's amazing. So when you look at our proficiency scores in our state, I don't think we have any proficiency scores statewide that are over 50%. So that tells you if we are number 2 in the nation for education, that's a pretty scary statistic. Now what you're doing is you're comparing a failing system against failing systems.
Wow.
And so although we do things well, I mean, I love Utah. I think we have the ability here to lead out in this area and do it better than any other state in the nation. I think we have the opportunity to be able to do that too as well, but we have to be able to see some of those.
You have to know how we're compared against some of our neighbors. So is there anything that we're specifically doing different than, let's say Idaho or Nevada, or obviously California, but Colorado? Or
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I can even answer that question on exactly what we're doing different. We're just doing it better, right, in many different ways. I love our teachers. We have great teachers. And I think if we could loose our teachers and let them go and actually let them teach, it would change everything. But there's so many restrictions. The programming has become so strenuous for them where it just requires so much work and they get a chance to do so little teaching. And I just would love to see a system in place where our teachers, we could loose them and let them go, let them master their curriculums, you know.
Getting rid of the Department of Education will help that at all?
I think it could help that. It depends on how we allow that to play out here in the state of Utah. If we ultimately, it's, you know, coming back to the states, a lot of people think that we have a lot to say, a big say in that, but it'll really come through legislation and how things are run there. And if our legislators can grab a hold of that and understand that we need to, you know, some of these things that are binding there to be released so that we can teach. I think in most circumstances, most teachers will step in and do what they're supposed to do, and the ones that don't, they need to go.
Well, I know the Department of Education had a lot of shackles on, because if you wanted the money, you
Yes.
had to do blank, 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 and blank.
Even
and
in Common Core and different things like
handcuffed
that.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have a chance, though, right now to change a lot of those things. My prayer is that we will, you know.
Are we going to change Common Core? Is that going to be the first thing that
DOE
goes out and we get rid of that?
It's a topic of conversation. So everybody's got to, I'm one of 15, right, on that board. Everybody's got to be on the same page when it comes to that. And I think that's where, and I've talked to many different teachers, there's things they like about Common Core, there's things they hate about Common Core. But ultimately it's going to come down to us making those decisions, and the people that we have on our staff that are in charge of that stuff.
Well, I grew up let's just take math, because math is like the biggest one that I'm frustrated with. And I was a math minor in school.
Mm-hmm.
And grew up with Saxon math. Loved,
Yeah,
learned it really easy. And then I look at the stuff my kids are doing. I'm like,
I know.
let me show you how to do this.
Right,
It'll teach you
right.
the easier way of
I
doing
know.
it. Going back to my Saxon days rather than
And
whatever.
the simplicity, right? A lot of that is gone.
Yeah.
And the basics, a lot of that is gone. And so you're trying to teach, you're building on top of a foundation that was never built. You know what I mean? So kids have all this information, but they don't really know their basic math. And you find that out when you go to the grocery store and you have one of them as a cashier and they have to count out change or something out of the till. And it might say what to give back, but to do the simple, it blows me away. And it breaks my heart actually for a lot of them. So to go back to the basics would be awesome. It really would
Well,
be.
the other thing I
Go back to
have
some of the
qualms
old
with
core.
is history. I think history classes is like one of the most important topics you can teach a student
I agree.
by far, because if you don't know our history, you're doomed to repeat
That's
it, right?
right.
And if you don't understand our history, then you're prone to condemn the United States because you don't understand what we've been through and how much we fought for it.
That's right.
And if history is skewed left-leaning or anti-United States or something like that, then the kids come out indoctrinated that the United States is horrible,
Yes.
it's not worth it. Everything we've ever fought for, it has brought us to this point.
That's right.
And I
We
think
need to talk
history,
about all of it too, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly.
the good, bad,
Every
it's just
bit of
got to
it.
be out in the
Yep.
open, right?
Yep.
It's got to be out there. Like, for example, one of my favorite stories about World War II was the Red Tails. I love that movie. I love the Red Tails.
Yeah.
I love the fight that they had in them. And I asked students, have you ever heard of the Red Tails? I'm like,
No.
who, what?
Yeah. I know.
It's just simple stuff like that they need to learn.
Absolutely.
And there was a lot of racism within the Red Tails, but they fought through that so well, and they were probably one of the best fighter wings out there because they stuck it out. And one of the parts that is very specific is when the bombers would go out, the white guys would want to become an ace, and so they go taking off after the fighters and just leave the bombers to get shot down, and they'd lose bomber after bomber. And each bomber's got 12 to 15 people in it, so one bomber gets shot down, you just lost 15 men.
Yeah. Yep.
And the Red Tails were the only wing that would stick with the bombers, and every bomber went out came back.
Wow. That's awesome.
They have the record of that. Every bomber that went out. I
Yeah.
think there was a couple that they lost, but it was almost every bomber that went out came back. And it came to where the bomber pilots were coming up to the Red Tails. Hey, can you guys please go on our mission? We need you there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know the Red Tails were an all-black wing. And they were the first all-black
Yeah.
wing. And probably the most honorable one out there. So, but it's just simple stuff like that. It's just not taught in history.
There's a lot not taught in history.
And then-
a lot.
And then the Wind Talkers, World War II, which were our Native Americans that created our code.
Mm-hmm.
I asked them, "Do you know what those were and how we actually won?" Because it was Navajo, and that's not taught anywhere.
Yeah.
And all they teach is slavery, the Trail of Tears with
For sure.
our Native Americans, all that kind of stuff, all the negative stuff, which they need to know.
Yeah, but we also,
But
think
they
about
needed to
God's
show-
hand in this country, right?
Yeah.
You can't remove that from history. It's a part of it. Like you can't say it didn't happen. It's in literature. It's in the writing of our forefathers. We ought to be talking about that. Even if somebody doesn't believe in God, it was a part of our history. And so it should be talked about. And those things have been removed too as well. So you think, and all these narratives that are pitched about it being a godless, start to this nation, it's just not true. That
But
is
you're
all
taking
lies.
people, thousands and millions of people from every country out there, and you're mixing them.
Right.
They all come in with their preset beliefs, their preset notions, what they're used to, and you're asking these people to come together, right? It's going to take generations
Absolutely.
for that type of a mix to come together. And the here and now expectation of people nowadays, well, why didn't they just do this? Why didn't they do that? You don't understand where they came up from, what countries they brought their morals from, their values from, how many generations it took, to teach that out of people. We're lucky to be where we're at right now.
I mean, look how far we've come.
Yeah,
It's
but
pretty amazing.
the progress, the development is not being taught in our schools.
Right.
It's just always demeaning, bad mouthing again. Because going back to my point is, if there's not conflict, if there's not this agitation, and then certain people just don't have power, and that's what they want. They want the power.
We set the stage for all that stuff too. You know what I mean? We have the opportunity to be able to communicate a message that's more positive. You know what I mean? A message. I think about my mom and my dad were the first to integrate white schools in Georgia. So when you see people spat on and fire hosed, that was them. They lived through that. And they came out of that growing as a person. My dad enlisted in the Air Force, and my mom, she worked in child development for 30 plus years. My dad, worked his way up to a master sergeant, got out, went back into civil service, and continued to serve that way. And they understood where they came from, but they didn't have to stay there. They came up out of that. So they taught us, all grown up, you can be whatever you want to be. Like this doesn't limit you. The color of your skin doesn't limit you. You can be whatever you want to be. And we can change through our messaging. We can change how people see the world. And I think sometimes we forget, we get what we focus on. So when you're focused on all the negative about this nation and what the things that took place, that's the perception that our young people have, and they live out of that. And it creates really an oppressor and oppressed mindset. And it's changed the trajectory of where we really could be as a nation. And so I say this, through our messaging, we can turn that whole ship in the right direction and change it for the good. So that's what
I had a fight about in high school and it wasn't about racism or anything. It was about global warming. My daughter had an environmental class, and the fights that we would have at night about global warming's a farce.
Yeah.
It's a power thing. It's and I'd go through the science of it, how the earth changed cycles, and she was complete. It took me years to unconvince my daughter.
It worked.
Yeah, about this whole global warming crap, because I wanted out of that class because I saw that indoctrination. I was just glad it was about global warming and not about something LGBTQ or something else that they're indoctrinating about. And I think that's what's happening a lot, not necessarily here in Utah, but you go to California, you go to New York, and there's more emphasis on teaching your kids that white privilege. I know. If you're a white kid, you're scum because you're born with this white privilege. And how does a kid grow up with that?
I know.
I mean, you're already killing their self-esteem right out the gate, even though they're a white kid, or their LGBTQ stuff is just so prevalent in there. Or if you want to change your sexual orientation, go ahead, we'll support you, and we're not going to tell your parent. There's so much stuff, and the emphasis has come away from math, history.
That's right. All the stuff they're supposed to be going there to learn, right? Yeah. Yep.
And they're, like you said, our test scores were like way at the bottom, but our activism
way up there
is way up there.
I know. Yep. I mean, can you imagine that 45% proficient in the topics that they're supposed to learn by the time they graduate? Over half of what they should have got, they didn't get it, And
but you ask them about some...
That's right.
Well, and they're top of the class.
I know. Yep.
So, I know you've only been there for 3 months, but are you seeing any of that? Are you seeing any improvements on that?
So I think the place we have to be careful is it's not everywhere, right?
No,
I'll have somebody send me a text about this going on in this school or that school, and we have to be careful not to launch out like it's everywhere.
That's what I'm asking you is, are you seeing it anywhere? Cause
I see it, and I do see it in some places. It's definitely, it exists. And I think probably the better way that we can handle that is to deal with it head on. Call that principal, call those districts.
Well, that's what the public wants to hear from you is how are we dealing with that head on?
Yeah, so on the board, it's very difficult. We don't really have the ability now to really take action on a lot of things, but we're making some changes in our rule that will allow us to be able to take action. I don't want to go into too many details about that because it's still something that's in the works.
Are there things that the board can do, or is there
we were given some power to legislators this year to make some big changes. Yeah. I'm super grateful for Katie Hall's bill that came out, and it's going to allow us to be able to enforce some things now. And
is there some things you're still having to refer up to the legislature for them to handle? Or?
Well, we shouldn't, but that's how it had to happen. They want us to do our job, right? And so it takes it off their plate when we can just do our job. And so we need to position ourselves and be in a place where we can do our job. When we can't reprimand or we can't, take action and maybe pull funding, whatever it might be, it makes it very difficult. And to me, it creates a system where there's no accountability, where people can just do whatever they want to do, and they're not held accountable for those actions. And so I do believe in local control, but I also believe in guardrails. I think that we need to have accountability. Mm-hmm. And so our job is oversight and control. And ultimately, what happens in this district, it falls on me.
What does the average mom or dad do? Say, I see a lot of children and parents in my profession. come in and say, brand new school. And she said, my daughter's up holding it all day because I guess the restrooms are, I want to say bilingual. They're not bilingual.
Oh.
Cut that out.
Bisexual.
Okay. Yeah.
They're
right.
just, female restrooms with several stalls. And she says it, and she's like, I don't want to go in there with a boy. She's not comfortable with
Oh,
that.
man alive.
In
I
a
mean,
Should be happening
brand new
in your
school
town.
Yeah.
in Davis County.
See, I didn't
So
even know
what-
that.
where
See,
does
she's
she
telling
take
me
the-
something for the first time. I didn't even know that. See, these are things that we need to know about and we need to talk about.
So where does that parent go to? Does she talk directly and like good
So-
school, good principals?
So this is a major issue right now that we're dealing with. Even how complaints come to the board. Right now, complaints come to our board, and they go to. There's a couple different ways they come. Audit is one. There's another hotline that people can call, and it goes there. But ultimately, those complaints are taken, and they are given back to the district. I don't ever see those complaints. And we're trying to make a move in one of our rules, R277123, that will change the way that happens. That now, when they call and make a complaint, it'll come to me. Not saying that I've got to take action. They can still go through their action plan. I think now we've
But you need to be aware of it at
I
least.
want to be aware of it. I don't want to hear about it from my constituent for the first time that this is going on. I would like to hear about it through the channel that they think I heard about it when they called and complained over the hotline. They think they're complaining to the state board. Well, I don't ever see those things. And so we're in the process of making changes to one of our rules, and prayerfully it'll pass and go through. It'll come to our committee this in the month of May, and then it'll go before the full. Prayerfully, it'll make it through committee, go before the full board, and we can make that change so we can set our eyes on those things. They don't want to bog me down with all the small complaints, but I care. I care about what's happening in our districts. I want to know what's happening in our schools. So,
Well, you can be selective too. If you're
Exactly.
seeing everything, you say, "Well, that one I don't need to worry about.
Yep.
That one I do."
well, sometimes a simple phone call can fix the whole
Yeah.
thing. Just a phone call, just so somebody knows, hey, somebody else knows that this is going on. You know what I mean? And it can take care of the whole thing. So our constituents have been calling me. I have a good relationship with our superintendent. I can call him, and if he thinks it's an issue that he needs to deal with, he'll deal with that. But he's also given me permission to make the phone calls to principals and deal with those things. So if there's an issue like that going on, I didn't even know we had a school like that
We'll
in
talk
Davis
after.
County. Yeah, that had that kind of an open. I didn't. Yeah.
I'm past that age. I don't have kids in school anymore. And then I even have a daughter who was so frustrated with the things happening in school. She'd even tried a charter school and didn't like the things her children are being taught. So she's homeschooling, and it's takes a great deal of her time.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of people moving that direction, and
Well, I see a lot of it out of state. A lot of people I know have friends up in Oregon, Washington, that have started their own school systems,
sure.
private schools amongst their own people,
Yep.
just to get their kids out of public school.
Yep.
Well, let's move on to our next topic here.
Okay.
So, governor just signed collective bargaining against the unions, and unions have a good and a bad place, right?
Sure.
Reagan always supported the unions and said collective bargaining should be there. There's nothing as powerful as collective bargaining. And it was a big, huge thing back in the 80s where you had to have that. That was a conservative thing to support it, so the unions actually had some teeth.
Right.
But I agree with this because I think the unions have gone the other direction.
Sure.
They've taken that and gone too far with it. How do you see this affecting our
Well, I think
schools right
if
now?
you were to look at the NEA, you would know that's the truth, right? And then it trickles down to UEA. And I'll be careful with everything that I say here, but I agree with what our legislator was trying to do here in passing this. Of course, it's really stirred the waters, right? And we do have some local, like our Davis Education Administration. I know some people that are involved in that are, I mean, they're fantastic people, and they feel like the rug has been pulled out from underneath them. But ultimately, this should open the door to give everybody a seat at the table.
Right. And again, you had said wording. They may
Yes.
not understand what it's saying.
Exactly. And so I think that's the key thing. I think when they understand that this just opens the doesn't mean that you can't come and talk about things. It just means that you can, and so can they, and so can they, and so can they. It gives everybody a seat at the table.
Well, I think the fear is there's a lot of people that see the teachers unions go left, go woke.
Well, they're bargaining for things that don't have anything to do with
Students.
right. So it's and that's the key
They
thing.
care about the teachers and not the kids.
Right. Right. So I
And
I
then you
think
can't
that's
fire bad teachers. You can't replace them, and it becomes a whole
right.
mess.
Yep. There's a lot of things there. So, but I think this referendum, I think it. I mean, I don't know if they got all the signatures or not. And I think
It's done.
it's allowed. It's allowed. What it's done is it's forced our legislators to come back and look at this too a little bit deeper. And I think during the interim, there's going to be a lot of discussions on how we're going to move forward with this. But there's still a lot to be known and discussed, and
Well,
how
the governor
things are going
signed
to
it,
go
so it's
down.
law now.
Well, it's
So
law, but I'm just saying I think they're trying to bring it to the ballot and
yeah,
put it back in the.
I heard that
And
too.
that's
They're
like
trying to bring it about.
320,000
Oh,
signatures.
that's right. And
at
they're
this
going to
point.
get the signatures,
Yeah,
it looks like,
it looks
because
like.
I hear in the parking
Well,
lots, they're
Trevor
just,
Lee was
was letting us know.
mentioning
Yeah, so it's coming, and I think what I've enjoyed is there's been some of our legislators that have met with people from our local education administrations and our associations, excuse me, and had like some really hard. I've been in one of those meetings, had some real heart to heart, and found out some things they didn't know that they thought were true that just weren't true, and it just kind of an eye opener, on some of the things that are going on. So there really are two sides, and it's really difficult to know how things are going to move forward with this when it does come back to the. I think it will end up coming back to the ballot. How things are.
Oh, I'm pretty positive it's going to come
Yeah.
back to the ballot.
Yeah.
And my fear is going to be misinformation again.
Sure.
Because
You need to
we
start
talked
talking about it now. I
Yeah.
mean, and if we could possibly get a newspaper to write the truth
Yes.
not
about
the
what
Tribune.
Right. I think it's important that everybody has a seat at the table, and it's especially parents, too. I think
There's a lot of
everybody needs to say-
misinformation going
yeah.
out there that says, well, you're not thinking about the teachers. Why'd you take this power? And they'll misconstrue it as us taking power from the teachers, us demeaning our teachers,
Right.
and that's not what it's happening.
or you're trying to take down unions.
Right.
It's putting the power back to where it should be, which is
Right.
with the students.
That's right. Yep.
Now, if we had an actual teachers union that supported the students and not woke ideology, then we probably wouldn't be doing this.
Sure.
But
Yep.
we don't
Yep.
have that.
And I think, I can't speak for everybody, but some of the local association people that I know, I think that's where their heart is, but it doesn't always get communicated all the way up the line, like for the.
Well, I think the
UEA.
locals are doing just
So,
fine,
yeah.
but I think where the unions have gone bad is in the union leadership
Yeah,
itself.
I agree.
Yeah, because local people are just good and they want to do what's best for their students, but the
Absolutely.
leadership is not their goal. The leadership goal is the union itself, keeping it there, keeping it monetized, keeping the power there, keeping
Yes.
their
absolutely.
goal is the survival of the union. It's not
Yep.
helping the individual student.
I agree.
Anyway, moving on from there. So now we've got talking about school safety, because obviously anytime anybody talks about schools, it's school shootings
Right.
going
Right.
across the country and how that gets bent out of shape. I mean, obviously, every single one of them's heart-wrenching,
Sure.
especially when you get 6-year-olds shooting. And
The one last night, the university, one of the Florida universities,
Oh yeah.
gunman was a
Yep.
son of a officer,
That's right.
yeah,
and her
Yep.
weapon, her service weapon.
It was her service
Heartbreaking,
weapon,
and we
wow.
don't even know all the facts yet.
No, not
you know?
yet. Not yet. Yeah. So our school board members sits on this committee with Ryan Wilcox too as well, the school safety committee, and
so what is Utah doing? I mean, they said I can read some of this here.
yeah.
HB 84 specifically requires 9 new safety measures in schools. They include video surveillance of entrances, security film on ground level windows, internal classroom door locks, bleed kits and first aid kits, and panic alert devices in all the rooms. According to the results of the assessment, 2/3 of the schools across the state reported having anywhere from 3 to 6 of the standards already in place. More than 21% have 7 to 9 standards in place. Roughly 10% of Utah schools only met 1 or 2 of the safety standards according to results. I mean, we're getting there.
Yeah, I think we're way ahead of where we were. Right, we're making strides to incorporate all this. I think we estimated it'd be about $500 million to make this happen statewide, right? And we just don't have that kind of money to pour into it. So there are things that can be done. I think that in the law that was passed, you can have a teacher there in the school that's that's armed, that's designated in a situation like that.
Well, I agree with the
to
rest of
gain
the
access.
country that schools should be hiring service officers and just having an armed.
I love it. I do. We've talked about it. Not everybody does.
Everybody's talked about it, too. You
Yep.
have so many of these ex-military people that are having suicidal thoughts
Yeah.
and needing something to do with their life.
Sure.
And
I think and I
You
think
have
the key thing is,
police
are they well
officers.
trained? Are they stable? I think if they're well trained, we know that they're stable.
well, they're already know they're well
yeah,
trained. It's
yeah,
just-
you know what I mean.
it's that service mentality, like going back, you 3 months out of being doing drugs, and all of a sudden you're serving your community.
Yeah.
That's what they need, is something
Right.
to get them outside of their box there, and nothing better than that than to be a service officer. But our schools need that,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
I think
I
they'd
think it's
be
much
there.
better to be proactive, right?
Yeah,
and
proactive,
those
put
things
somebody in
place. I'm all about that. I am. I got a little heated for this during our campaign because a lot of people don't want that, but I don't know what would be a greater deterrent, right, than to have armed guards there,
Or
one of
armed
our
teachers.
local
Why is
schools.
so much fight about? Well, I don't
Just
want my
there's-
teacher having a
right,
gun in class.
Right.
Well, they just don't want the gun in the
Right.
school.
They
Gun in
want-
the school means something
Someone's gonna
bad
get
I
shot.
don't understand.
Utah Military Academy. If you go there's armed guards
Yeah.
walking the hall, and it's
My
pretty
nephew
awesome.
Great
goes
place.
there. My
It's
nephew
pretty
graduated
awesome,
from Utah Military Academy.
It is. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't. I would stand behind it 100%. But that's expensive too. To
Well,
make
we
that
know
happen.
you well. What are you seeing amongst the school board, amongst legislators?
I don't hear a
What's the
lot of
pop-
pushback there. I've not heard a lot from our school board. Of course, during the session, we were, our priorities. This is one of our priorities too, school safety as well. But the funds they just weren't there to make all this happen. So
Well, how about just popularity of getting a service officer or something like that? There,
that's different, right? The bulletproof glass stuff is okay. Even the one teacher, the armed guards, that's not very popular amongst.
that surprises me. That's still not very popular
No,
because
it's
that's a
not very
huge discussion amongst people.
I love it, but not everybody's on board. I mean, even our church, like,
Really?
oh, we're ready. We have a safety team, and they do a really, really good job.
Well, I see a lot of it on just how you grew up, because as you can tell, I'm a country boy, and I mean, growing up in high school, I could walk out to my high school parking lot, and I could have told you of at least 20 guns in the parking lot. Just 22s and rifles and invisible. I mean,
Right.
a lot of my friends would drive their pickup trucks, and they'd be hanging in the rack in the
Yep.
back window. Clear as bell for
That can
everybody
be
to
part of
see.
the problem. Like, I'm a city girl, came out to the country, and it can be upbringing. It's something you're not used to. You
Sure.
come here, and it just seems so foreign. It seems
Right.
scary.
To me, it wasn't. I was born
Right.
with guns.
To me, it would create an environment that's conducive for learning at the highest level if you know that you're safe there. You got guards there, on staff, and they're there at the school. They're there for your protection and safety. I think it would create an environment where kids feel safe.
Yeah.
And so
And they
it's-
think bulletproof glass and all that kind of stuff would work, but
right.
you need someone to take down the threat within
Yep.
seconds
I know.
and
I
not
agree.
minutes. And bulletproof glass is just not going to do
Yep.
it.
And it's just that element of knowing you have someone there to protect you. I don't know if you guys were at the Weber County luncheon a few weeks ago when Blake Moore was there, and there was all those hundreds of protesters out front yelling and screaming, but the police presence was strong, and they were just standing out there. But just them being there creates that.
Deterrent.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're safe. Let's go. We're good to go. Even when Blake Moore got there, he felt safe knowing that OPD was out there and they had his back.
We look at how secure our airports are,
Absolutely. Yep.
and
Absolutely.
Good point.
we
Yep.
can't secure our schools that same way.
I know. You don't have to convince. I'm on board.
I mean,
but-
TSA is insane.
Right.
And we all know how bad
I know.
TSA is. But our kids can't have the same security as our airports.
I agree.
And we don't need like those type of metal detectors, everything for our kids to walk through and everything like that.
Yeah.
Because it's the risk is usually not from normal parents, normal students.
Right.
Some outsider that all of a sudden woke up that morning, has an agenda.
Yep. That's
And
very true. And I think people that would be against it, sometimes it's if they're administrators, it's because they don't want to pay for it. They're like, well, where's the money going to come for this? Because it is going to cost money to do that. And
well, that's
so
where you talk to your legislators
Right.
and say, okay, we're going to give you this much for salary for a service officer to be on staff at all times.
Yep.
There's your budget.
Yep. And I don't know what law it was. I wish I knew. Even our resource officers in school, that took a lot of their power away. And so I can't. I wish I'd have come ready with that. But it took a lot of their power away too, as well, where they can't
They can't
act,
do
they
anything.
can't do anything. You know. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think a
the
lot of
only
this
way.
is cutting the strings and re-empowering people once again, right, to do what we know we need to do. You know.
Well, when we were 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Israel, and you have Hamas storming the border. They're getting women, kids,
Right.
and you got people going home, and every home has a gun. They're required to in Israeli laws because every citizen is part of the army until they die. So everybody was going home and getting their own weapons and going out there and fighting. So you had common citizens just going out and fighting to that onslaught, or else it would have been a lot worse than just
sure.
the students at that concert there. But it's a different mentality because they have that constant threat in front of them all the time, and it's not from school shooting; it's from an aggressive
Right.
country. We got to have that type of same mentality, but
I agree.
we're in such a bubble that it's not going to happen to my school. It's just this naive mentality, and then the other naivety about it is again, people are afraid of the gun itself.
Right. Right.
And not of the people wielding it.
Right. Right.
The gun is going to hurt me just by being in the room with me, and I think it has to do mostly with upbringing.
I think you're right too.
And people just got to get away from the nervousness, and I mean, a lot of people are. And we're going to get into our next article about gun safety here, but me growing up, my dad had a .357 revolver. It was a massive gun. And he had a big waterbed, and he had a drawer that was right underneath him, and he kept it in that drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And since I was 2, 3, 4 years old, I knew where that gun was. Never once thought of going in there and opening up the drawer.
Right.
I mean, I actually did open the drawer a few times. He said, "Go get this," and he'd had other knickknacks or something like that. And I'd go in there, and the gun was there, and I'd grab whatever I needed, and I'd leave. Right. But I grew up from 5, 6 years old shooting the things.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
Makes a
we'd
big
go out
difference.
shooting 22s and stuff like that. And as soon as we could hold a bigger rifle, we'd be holding a bigger rifle. And then to shoot his .357, that thing had some kick. So we'd get up there, and then he'd have to force my hand because we couldn't hold the kick, and he'd
Right.
keep it from hitting ourselves in the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I want you to understand how powerful this thing is and how loud it is." So he'd make us shoot it at least once without ear protection.
Wow.
And then because he says, "I want you to know." He says, "We're going to do this once.
Yeah.
I want you to know."
Yep.
And we knew 2 seconds, half a second into that, but we knew how powerful, and we'd blow things up and stuff like that. But we grew up with a massive amount of respect. I had my own gun when I was a teenager. I bought my own kids guns when they were teenagers.
Yep.
It's nothing.
Yep.
Like I said, I had 20 friends that had rifles in their trucks in the high school parking lot growing up.
Yes. Yep.
And we'd literally go out shooting right after school or something like that, or grew up hunting. And then you get into city, and most people haven't seen one, haven't touched one,
Yep.
and that's where the fear comes in. It's just from
Well, and you have to have grace that it's something they don't know, they haven't understood,
Sure.
and there's got to be education, right? I know my son, he paraded my granddaughters up to me, and he said, "I want you to know I've taught your granddaughters." He goes, "How do we always treat a gun? Like it is loaded. Where, how do we not?" And he made her recite the rules
Yeah.
for the guns.
Well,
in
I
the
made
home.
my kids do that with a BB gun. Yeah, because I first started with the BB gun, pellet guns, and I teach them the trigger safety, and anytime they put their finger on that trigger, I whack them in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they know it too.
Yep. We have a guy from our church.
Anytime they
certified.
pointed at anywhere but the ground or the sky, I whack them in the back of the head.
Yep. It's good. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's good, that repetition, right? So they know.
Well,
Is that
they
what your
know.
security
Yeah.
guy does
No,
too?
no. He was a little more gracious. We took all of our college and career up shooting. And I think at this time there was, in the group, it was a smaller group, maybe 29, 30. So imagine having 29, 30 people, and probably more than half of them had never shot a gun before. He was a certified safety instructor, and he shoots all the time. And the people that we had come to help, they shoot all the time. But it was just awesome to see people that never held a gun before, never shot a gun before, get to shoot, gain a whole new respect for guns and how they work and weapons. And I just think at some point, probably everybody needs to have that opportunity. You
Well,
know?
growing up, we had scouts, right?
Yeah.
And we'd go shooting 22s all the time as a scouting program. When we'd go up to these scouting competitions, they'd have the 22s out there, and my son would go up there and I'd say, he's got it. And they go, he's got what? I'm like, no, he's got it.
Yeah.
And he'd put 25 shots inside of a quarter at 50 yards.
Yeah.
My son at 14, 15.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, he's got it. I'm like, he's got it. 'Cause he'd always come out with that. Or even as a bow and arrow, because my son would always win the bow. Because I had him out shooting bows. In fact, they're coming over tomorrow to shoot bows out
Really?
the back.
Oh, that's awesome.
Awesome.
Before they take off to the military tomorrow, we're going to all be out back shooting our bows. But so
That's cool.
it's that type of presence. So the next article here is gun instructions. So K through 12, is this going to go through, you think, where
I don't see
you
why
got
it
Rex,
shouldn't.
Representative Rex Ship,
Mm-hmm.
who's proposing this. Proposed classroom firearm safety sessions would be brief, 5 to 10 minutes in length, and typically involve students watching an approved instructional video. As outlined in the bill, schools would be required to provide brief firearm safety courses 3 times during a student's primary school years, including kindergarten.
They should have to recite
Right.
those rules,
The younger, the better. I
the
mean,
rules of gun safety.
that really is a way to save lives. A lot of times when people get hurt with firearms at a friend's house or something, it's just because it's curiosity, or they just don't have any idea how to handle a firearm. And so you have those mistakes that take place. I think if you can do it in 5 or 10 minutes with a simple video and that repetition as kids are growing up, through school, they get a chance to see that. Why not take that opportunity? We're wasting our time looking at stuff that doesn't make any difference. This could make a
Yeah,
difference.
everybody's
and
on
save a kid's
TikTok and
life.
YouTube
Yeah.
nowadays. Why not
Yep.
do this, right?
This could definitely save a life for sure.
Well, the other part of this too is I'm hoping some of that bleeds over to the parents and takes the fear of guns away,
Sure.
so that we can get a resource officer into the schools that have a weapon.
Yep.
Because I'd feel safe with I have a one son in school now, but I'd feel safer if there was somebody there, because you can't just wait for the cops to show up. I mean,
No.
they're 2-3 minutes away.
Yep. You can do a lot of damage in 2 or 3
Two,
minutes.
3 minutes. Well, it's just 2-3 minutes.
And they're
2,
not going
3
to come
minutes.
right
That's
in. That's just not how it works. They don't just come charging right in. That's not the way it's.
I could
set up.
round off 90 rounds in
Yep.
2-3 minutes.
You're right about that. Yeah.
Couple clips,
Yep.
and then they're trying to blame the guns. Every single time there's a school shooting, all of a sudden, Second Amendment comes up again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they want to take away the evil-looking guns, that AR-15 guns, just
Yeah.
because they look like they're assault rifles,
Yeah.
and they want to limit the magazines. I'm like, it's not gonna matter.
No, it's not going to matter. It's not.
I
It's
can
so
change a
true.
magazine in about a second and a half.
Yep. You're right about that.
Takes me a hit button clip, and I'm pretty fast at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, I
so,
like this being on the proactive side of it.
and
you know what
not
I
being
mean?
an automatic. Well, there's no automatics allowed already, and a lot of people think so, but there's a big stigma with that. But that's what the school shooters are going to come in with, is
Right.
something like that. And you got a resource officer at best is probably just going to have a pistol,
Mhm.
and they're going to need to know how to use it, and they're going to need to defend themselves. And I mean, if they had 2 seconds to react and take out the school shooter, things like Columbine and others. What was the name of the school, the elementary school up in Jersey, where
know what
the
you're talking
kindergartners, the 6-year-olds were killed? I mean, that was probably the most devastating one
I
of all of
know.
them.
Yeah.
Can't even imagine, but how many lives you could have saved by just having
Absolutely.
someone there, and why parents would. Some of those parents that had their children die are still adamantly against having a resource officer in there. I'm like, that could have saved your kid.
That's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you're still seeing within the school board, within legislature, a lot against that still.
I still think there's people that aren't on board with having armed guards. So that's why they're deferring and going different directions, talking about film on glass and all these different things, because it's still a lot of pushback in those areas. So
Um,
Yep.
Sad to see that. All right, next. So, moving on to a different topic. Explicit content in schools. We're going to move right into explicit content, and then we're going to move into LGBTQ stuff.
Okay.
But this was probably one of the biggest topics of this last election. The reason why you got in, the reason why our county commissioner got in, because he was in charge of the public schools. You guys are obviously in charge of the school libraries. I've gone into some of the public schools, and within the kids section, found some of these explicit books.
In
Really?
your local public libraries?
Public libraries, not the school libraries, the public libraries.
Mhm.
In the kids section,
Yep.
found these type of stuff. And right now, they're still saying there's a lot of it within our elementary schools. Right here it says, our research uncovered over 100 sexually explicit book titles rated 4 or 5, which is the same equivalent as an MPAA NC-17 movie rating or higher,
Yep.
which is pretty explicit,
Yep.
or higher. There are over 1,100 copies of these 100 sexually explicit book titles currently in Utah K through 12 schools. For example, the online catalog for an elementary school in Salt Lake City School District has Empire of Storms, a book containing explicit descriptions of intercourse using adjectives as undulating, thrusting, trembling, slamming, blasting, arching, searing, releasing, groaning. This book, which is too indecent to be read in legislative or school board meetings of adults, and which has been removed from 5 Utah school districts, was recently challenged and retained by a junior high school in Park City. They didn't want to get rid of it.
It breaks
I'm
my
for
heart. It does. And I had some battles with some people along the way, and one of them was a librarian, and she just touted freedom of expression, freedom of speech. You can't take this away. People deserve the opportunity to be able to read these books if they want to, and what it is pornography, and I don't understand what happens in a person's mind where they would think it's okay for a child to read these things.
Well, I'll tell you a personal story. So, in this last election, I was calling for our county commissioner, trying to get him in, because his competition wanted to allow these books into the public libraries, straight up. And so I took it upon myself, and I was emailing every single county delegate and telling them about what was going on. And so I personally was getting out of my personal email and everything, my personal time, and I was getting emails back from supposed Republicans saying, no, that should be in schools, it should be allowed. Literally just openly saying, one of them literally came back and says, our kids need exposure. They're going to have exposure at some point. They need exposure to it now so they can know what it's about, what it's talking about. Literally came out openly saying, needed exposure. And this is another delegate, wow. Republican delegate, wow. Voting in the caucus. And I'm like, you're not Republican, you're not conservative. Right.
For what purpose do they need exposure?
And I countered back this as, well, you just can't take that from our kids. They have to have exposure to this thing because it's part of life.
But they don't have to have exposure to the Constitution or the Founding Fathers or the history of the nation.
Right. Yeah,
they said they have to have exposure to that. And I'm like, no. So this happened like recently. So I know
it's very twisted.
There's a lot of people.
It is. It's there's something greater that's beneath the surface there. And I can't pinpoint what it is, but you're exposing kids, you're planting the seeds, pornographic seeds, in the heart and mind of a child, because their imagination now takes what they've read and it plays it out, you know what I mean, to the best of their ability. And it opens the doors. I think it enhances maybe curiosity that's already there, and who knows the direction it's going to pull them in when they begin to read things like that. We're talking. I had a parent reach out to me the other day. I think their child is in the 4th grade and said they came home with this book and read me some of the book, and I thought, are you kidding me? And of course, there's been complaints of the principal, complaints to the library, and all those things. But now, with the way the law is set up, you have to have so many schools that deem that as being sensitive material before it can actually be removed off of the,
And it
the
shouldn't be
shelves
like
in our
that.
school. It shouldn't be
And a lot
like
of people are saying, well, that's freedom of speech, that you're curtailing the First
understand.
Amendment. I'm
Why-
like,
but why
no,
does it
that's
need- why
not
does it need
First
to be in
Amendment.
elementary school? Why does it have to be in
We're,
schools?
we're
Yeah.
not
Order that mess
saying,
online if you want it. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
don't.
if you as a parent want to expose your kids to
That's
that,
right.
that's your prerogative.
That's right. Yep. That's right.
Child abuse.
Yeah,
But it
that's
should be
where
in
I'm at, too.
schools, right?
You know, pornography is, it's one of the most devastating things that's happened to our young people anyways.
Ruins
It
lives,
ruins
families.
lives, ruins families, and people think, well, they'll get older, they'll grow up. No, then it destroys
gets
marriages.
worse.
It gets worse and worse. And these are the seeds that are being planted early on in life, and you can't undo that. You know what I mean? You can't undo that. The damage is done.
How many serial killers say that's where it started?
It does start. Yep. And it's yeah.
Well,
it's-
then
it blows
you're
my
wondering
mind.
why there's so many teen pregnancies. You wonder why abortion's a problem.
Right.
Because the
Right.
morals are gone already.
Yep.
Being exposed to this at youth, the morals are already degrading. So then we go up to teen pregnancies. We go up with people wanting and needing abortions,
Yep.
and it augments from there.
Yes. Absolutely.
One thing to the next.
Absolutely.
I mean, our next article here, a lot of people are fighting it because now we're banning books.
Right. Yep.
Why are you banning
That
books?
was one of the top questions I got asked. Are you a book banner? Are you for? I said I'm about banning books that have sexually explicit material. They shouldn't be in our schools. You know,
Exactly.
100%. They should be off our shelves. Well, we'll call it whatever you want. Like, but if that's what you think book banning is, that's what it is. But somebody's got to take a stand here when it comes to our kids. Why does it need to be in elementary schools, junior high schools, or high schools? I understand people want to make the argument about high school, but still, I think there has to be some guardrails put in place. You can't just feed this mess.
If
to
they're
people.
under 18, it should be
Yeah.
their period.
I agree.
Period.
I agree.
And even in the public libraries, okay, keep it over in the adult section.
Right.
It should not be in the kids section.
Yep.
Period.
I agree. That's where I think that's nefarious behavior, right? Somebody knows what they're doing behind the scenes to allow this stuff into, especially
not
when I think about
allowing, they're pushing
elementary. Yeah, that's okay. That's a good way to say it. That's exactly what's happening. It's being planted there on purpose.
I wonder what would happen if Child Protective Services came into a home to do some sort of welfare check or investigate and found that book in the home.
Right.
How would that go? But yet it can be in the
I
school?
know. It's
Well, I was
crazy.
kind of proud of this because right here it says Utah passed one of the strictest bills related to books in public schools last year.
Mm-hmm.
This is 2024 because this came out just a few days ago, March 7th. House Bill 29 allows parents to challenge books they deem sensitive material, and it also outright bans books from all public schools in the state if these books have been deemed objective, sensitive material, or pornographic. Per state code in at least 3 public school districts or 2 public school districts and 5 charter schools statewide. The bill went into effect July 1st, 2024. And it started with 13 titles. We're up to 17. Actually, I think there should be a lot more than just 17 books.
Oh,
I
I
think
do
they're
too.
being conservative with 17 books.
Yep.
But people are already, like this article right here is not pro banning book. It's
Right.
against it.
Right.
That's why it's got big, large letters banned. Oh, no, it's banned.
Is there a legal definition to what's considered sensitive or the terms used in this article?
I'm not sure. I don't.
There's a
I
lot of
can't answer
Sarah
that.
J. Maas books. I mean, I think that's the majority of them, but
So we need to ban God in schools.
Right.
take
And
prayer out
the
of school.
flag.
Right. But
Can't
then
have the
you-
Bible in school.
Right. You know what I mean? Yep. That's somebody threw that out. Well, the Bible's sexually explicit. I said, there's no way you're reading the Bible and you're coming up with this kind of stuff in these books. You know what I mean? Like it's not taking your mind there. God does it in such a way. It's just so perfect the way He lays it out, where a child could read the Song of Solomon, right? And they're not going to take that and have any sort of crazy thoughts, you know. But this stuff is just it's vile. It's vile.
Extremely
It's extreme.
explicit.
Yep.
Extremely explicit. But again, it's where I was saying people want to just knock it down, right? They see something wholesome, moral,
Right.
makes them uncomfortable, and they just got to burn it down.
Yep.
They got to crash it. They can't take it.
Yeah. Yes.
And this is part of it, but it's where they're attacking our kids. They know we're the most sensitive. I mean, that's what I was saying about Israel is
The
the
purest
reason why
minds, right.
Hamas attacked them when they did is because they know they're the most vulnerable point.
Yep.
The same thing here is they're attacking us at our most vulnerable, which is our kids.
Yes.
indoctrinate the younger generation.
That's right.
And they grow up knowing this. That's why the universities are as bad as they are, because they want to indoctrinate them coming out of school
Yep.
right out the gate, so that they're different.
Oh,
Adults have
especially they're at a
different
place
kids.
in life where they're questioning a lot of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to find yourself in a place where now you have this college professor, he's so smart. You know what I mean? And he must know a lot about everything. And
Talk
they-
about
they
wanting to be
take
one
it-
of the cool kids.
That's right.
You want to be in
Yep.
with that
Yep.
that knowledgeable
All
professor.
of a sudden, what they say becomes almost like the gospel. Like, wow, that must be true. You know. And,
Well, I'm seeing people that even want to change our sex education policies.
right.
So I pulled up our sex education policies.
We have some pretty good ones here in our state.
Yeah, we have some really good ones. It says mandates the state board of education to establish curriculum requiring for grades 8 through 12. I don't know why it's not K through 12. On the prevention of communicable diseases, this instruction must stress the importance of abstinence from all sexual activity before marriage and fidelity after marriage as methods of preventing certain communicable diseases, and the importance of personal skills encourage individual choice of abstinence and fidelity. So our policy has always been abstinence,
Yeah.
and there's a huge push about teaching self-pleasuring, about teaching sex is normal, everybody has it,
Yep.
but then you get the irresponsibility about it, and now you got an abortion problem.
Right. Absolutely.
And so the two of them are very, very well linked, the abortion problem and this,
Yes.
because of
Yes.
the liberal stance on it for most people. And we're lucky to be in a state that does this, because I know
So thankful.
there's a bunch of blue states that don't. It's
Yep. And the board does a good job here too. We had an issue come up the other day with one of our schools, and they very quickly said that's not allowed, you know, and it was awesome. I don't want to go into all the details, but it was good to see action taken very quickly. Like, nope, can't.
well,
do
that's
that.
what my fear is there's some teachers that have the mentality that kids need to know about this.
Sure.
Just like the other delegate I spoke to, that no, this is something they need to know about, and they try to bend the rules.
Yep. And you know what? To be honest with you, in this, we people get dealt with, you know, on stuff like this, and there's a whole executive, you know, time that we have in our board meetings where these issues come up, and they're dealt with. So it's a case by case basis. When this stuff is being done and it's reported, it gets handled. And so I'm grateful that that's happening more and more and more in our state.
Well, I'm grateful you're doing the rules where it reports up to you and not just the school district,
Absolutely.
because sometimes I think it just gets buried in the school district. Oh, we don't have time for this.
Right.
It's not important enough. I got other things that are more important, and they just don't deal with it. They just
Yep.
let it slide.
Well, for a while, I mean, when I say let it slide, there was no, like, now there's 45 days they have to comply with whatever it is that you know, whatever the complaint was. You have to show proof that you've taken care of the issue. Before that, there was nothing. So the people getting complained on would receive the complaints, and there was no accountability there. And so I'm grateful that there's, you know, strides being taken in the right direction to make
I'm
sure
glad
that
to
we're
hear
handling
that too,
these
and
things.
I really hope that rule you guys are going actually comes into place.
Yep, me too.
So, like I said, things go by steps, right?
Yep.
One step at a time. They try to get something sexually explicit into the libraries, and then they try to get gender flags in there.
Sure.
And then next step would be pronouns.
Right.
Our governor had a problem with this
Right.
when I saw that thing a couple of years ago. I'm like, introduce himself as he and him, and
I think it comes back to the cool kids thing again, right? You know what I mean?
well, he
trying
came
to-
right out and said he's got a soft spot for the LGBTQ community. I'm like, I got a tolerant spot for them. I'll let them
Right.
do their thing, and they
Right.
let me do mine. That's about it.
Yep.
I don't want them anyplace else.
Right.
Right? I'm not saying they can or cannot do anything
Sure.
they want to do.
Yep.
I draw the line with my kids. Anybody under 18,
As we should, right?
and
Right. Yep.
if you want to have sexual dysphoria after you're an
Right.
adult, go
Yep.
for it.
Yep.
I don't care.
No space for that kind of indoctrination.
care.
Our kids go to school, and I think we have to constantly remind ourselves and staff and teachers that's what they're there for, right? They're there to go to school. We want to teach them, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic. We want to give them some durable skills, but all this stuff has no place.
So did you have
in
any
schoolhouse.
kickback on this with teachers. I mean, I think this helped teachers a lot because as a teacher, I would be afraid if I misgendered some kid
Yeah.
and all of a sudden I'm
Well, it's
getting
impossible
reprimanded
now,
at school.
right? Like you don't even know what they want to be called. You know what I mean? So it's impossible. And I'm sure you saw in the UK that they finally ruled what a woman is.
Well,
you
most
know?
importantly,
Yeah.
we talked last week with Trevor Lee what Colorado just did.
What do they do?
So now, if you're in a divorce case and you misgender your own kid, it's considered child abuse, and Child Protective Services can come and take your kids out of the house.
Wow.
It's now law in Colorado. If you misgender your own kid,
That's crazy. But that's where this
they
kind
can
of
be
stuff-
removed.
Right.
And it
That's
starts
what is
here.
too. Right.
So I'm glad that teachers at least have the ability to, if they misgender, they're not afraid that they're going to lose their job, they're going to get sanctioned
You
somehow.
can't keep up with that. It's impossible. You know, it could change from day to day. You know what I mean? How would you even keep up with that? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful too. There's a lot of
And it's
great
just a
things.
proposed bill. So Nicholas Peck proposed a bill that would prohibit teachers who refuse to use gender-specific language to accommodate another individual from being punished by their employers or the State Board of Education. This comes just weeks after a teacher in Ohio successfully sued the school district for disciplining her after she refused to use transgender students' preferred names and pronouns. The Utah bill clarifies that teachers who, in good faith or due to personal, moral, or religious beliefs, refer to a student by their biological sex pronouns or birth name cannot be disciplined regardless of school or district policy.
I like it. That's Nicolene Peck. She's a new representative there, and I think she's going to do a great job. I really, really do. That's pretty neat. So that was just this last legislative session, right? And it didn't make it through. The bill, but I don't know if they're going to talk about it in the interim session.
I hope it makes it all the way through because she's proposed it,
Yep.
and I mean we'll talk about with Kellyanne next week about it, see what they can do to get it go
Yeah,
through. But I don't think teachers should have this fear
I agree with you 100%.
because it's not going to stop there because they'll go from teachers to Colorado
Yep.
to the
Yep.
parents.
This
This is the stepping stone.
So much already, you guys. They deal with so much already. I mean, can you imagine that if you had to adhere to that on a regular? It's over the top.
You're afraid of getting sued.
They already can't discipline. You know what I mean? Like there's so many things that so as a board, we're coming back around too. Like, no, we need accountability practices, not restorative practices, right? You already can't discipline. Now you can't, you're going to get in trouble for saying the wrong thing. All this pressure when their job is to teach, right? And to help better our kids. And they have all these parameters around them that make it very difficult to just do that. So I like this.
Yeah. Going back to schools, it's for math and history.
That's right.
It's not for any
That's
of
what
this
we're there
other
for.
crap.
Not indoctrination, right? Education. They're there to educate.
Should be on one focused mind and one only.
Absolutely.
So, moving from there to boys and girls sports, White House put this thing out, and there's been a lot of kickback on it. We saw the little skiff between Trump and the governor of Maine. I
Yeah.
thought that was hilarious. But they ended up coming right into and abiding by it because they just pulled funds. Last week we talked about it with Trevor Lee, how they put out a nationwide memorandum the Trump administration did to all school districts that if any school district is not abiding by Title IX, which in their mind is not allowing boys and girls sports,
Right.
funds are pulled.
Yep.
Period. End of story. And he says right here, therefore, it is the policy of the United States to rescind all funds from educational programs that deprive women and girls of fair athletic opportunities, which results in the endangerment, humiliation, and silencing of women and girls and deprives them of privacy. It shall also be the policy of the United States to oppose male competitive participation in women's sports more broadly as a matter of safety, fairness, dignity, and truth. So going back to what you were just saying, it's against the rules now.
Yeah.
Well, we're still seeing people trying to push that.
Yep. Yeah, I think you saw it in the, I don't know, it was fencing. Did you see that the other day when a fencer, and now she's been kind of ostracized as a result of it. Did you see that? Where
No.
she refused to
Yeah.
Oh,
to
She just
Okay,
walked
right.
off.
yeah, she
Just
just
walked
yep,
away.
she did, and I'm so glad she
How
took
brave.
that stand. We have to protect women's spaces. We really, really do, and this is an area where I'm so thankful to see young ladies stand up and take a stand here. It'll
Yeah.
just be a tsunami wave, right? Of guys coming in and beating powerlifting records, and one girl had her face fractured in a volleyball
Well,
game.
we're going
I
to talk
mean,
about that too,
it's
because that's
just crazy.
coming in the next one. But
Yeah, yep.
there's a comedian that said, "What we're going to do is what if?" Well, no, he said, "What if LeBron James all of a sudden said he was a woman?" And he went into the NBA and scored 1,000 points, broke every record. Would that be fair?
Yep, I saw that. Yeah.
That was hilarious. I'm like, so true, because
It's very true.
we're different. We're supposed to be different.
That's right.
I saw a video the other day that men are out there to handle the rain and the damage and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and the women have to be strong enough to hold them up,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
we come home defeated and beat up, and
That's right.
we can fall apart, and the women has to be strong enough to hold the man up. So then that's what God intended us,
That's
is
exactly
to be the
the way He
helpmeet.
intended it. Yep.
That's what He said in Genesis, to be the helpmeet. We can't be without the woman, neither the woman without the man,
Yep.
because it's a team.
That's absolutely.
And
Yep.
if you don't have that team support, then society falls apart.
Yeah.
If you don't have that team support, then your kids fall apart. And then you have the drug problems and all that kind of stuff. That's even worse, more rampant, because the crime increases. I mean, it's proven. I mean, it's absolutely proven that
Yeah.
if the family falls apart, the community falls apart, the country falls apart.
Yeah. I didn't bring this up, but even in my home growing up, that's kind of what happened. My parents were going through some major issues. I don't want to go into all the details, but my family was being pulled apart, and we were just kind of left. My like I said, my mom was God-fearing, loved the Lord, walked with the Lord, but her focus at that time had been taken away from us onto what was going on with my dad, and it just allowed that opening, to be there. And it wasn't just me and my sisters. We all kind of drifted in directions we shouldn't have gone. But when that family unit's intact, and when it's functioning the way that God intended it to, it's amazing the stability it brings to a home and to a child. I always tell people, I was 18 years old, my parents finally divorced. And even being 18, they waited till I was grown, right, to get divorced. It was the most devastating thing that ever happened in my life. Even though things were all over the place, they were still together, you know what I mean? And it was a very devastating thing when my parents divorced at 18, and it kind of sent me over the edge. So I'm not blaming it on that, but I went into a tailspin, as a result of that. So the family unit is so
I feel for you, because I'm divorced.
yeah,
And I divorced when my kids were young, and it was the hardest thing to go through for my
Sure.
son, because I saw the pain in their eyes. My ex did not handle it well,
yeah,
used them as leverage a lot of the times, and so now my kids are grown up, and because I really overemphasized paying them a lot of attention, because I read what would happen to divorced kids,
Sure.
did everything I could. So I mean, they're pretty well rounded now, and
it's great.
but it was tough for years there. But it's where I'm seeing out there that, especially with the feminism that's going on right now, that women don't need men anymore,
Right.
and they can raise kids on their own. And the home without the father in it, the homes are falling apart. The kids are not
it's
being
bad.
stand-up citizens within society. It's just not happening.
Yep.
And we all know it, but the black community is probably the worst affected
is.
by that.
100%.
The fatherless homes.
Yep.
And just what fathers could do in homes
Yep.
would be so tremendous. And a lot of these issues we've been talking about would be resolved if we had-
Overnight. I mean,
overnight.
really, and a lot. And you talked about the black community. A lot of it is even through music, like the hit it and quit it culture. That has been brought in through hip hop music, and it's just destroyed lives and homes. And you've got 6 baby mamas. You know what I mean? Because you just did what it said. You know what I mean? You did what the song said. You fell into the culture, and it brought forth that kind of fruit. And we're watching the devastation of it now in our communities.
I think hip hop itself has devastated a lot of the youth.
Big time. big time.
Because hip hop is not just a black thing either. 'Cause
Right.
I was way into hip hop when I
think
was
a
a
lot
kid
of people,
too.
right? And I think people think that music is all moral. It's not. Like there's a message there, right? And you begin to become what you listen to. I tell people all the time, the Bible says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. What I put into my eyes, what I put into my ears impacts my heart. What impacts my heart comes out of my life. And so if I'm not careful with those things, the influences I put in are who I become. I tell young people all the time, you are who you are becoming. You say you want to be this, but the ingredients you're putting into your life right now, you are who you are becoming. And so if that's the kind of music you're listening to and that's what you feast on all the time, you cannot separate your outward action from your inward attitude. It's going to come out in your life. And so that's what's happened. You've got generations of young people coming up adopting these principles that are being preached in these songs and in this music. And when they act it out, we're mad, but this what's promoted in our society, So yeah, it's had a devastating impact, especially on the black.
Well, you look at people like
rap
Cardi B.
culture.
Cardi B was a stripper
I know.
before she was
I
famous.
know.
She was a stripper,
Elevated too as a stripper,
elevated.
right? Yeah. Drug dealers elevated, and now when people begin to do that, they go to prison. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to go shoot up this whatever, and then they go to prison. And it's like, man, there's a price. There's a seed that's sown, and there's always going to be a harvest that's reaped, and there's a price to be paid for all of it, every last bit of it.
Yeah. Well, getting back to men and women's sports. So there's a website that I think this website's hilarious. It's called They Cheated, and emphasis on the he with inside of they. So if you guys can't see it, it actually says they. It doesn't say he. It's because they didn't want to call it he cheated, because it's referring to about the they, them,
Right.
the pronouns of he's or all of a sudden she's. And they track every award, medal, trophy, or anything within the entire world that were won by men in women's sports. Wow. Every single one of them is on this website. And they go through
There's that many. Huh?
Just
they could create a whole website from it. Wow.
story and part of it, like this one, they have an actual injury report of every woman or female who was injured because of a trans athlete that injured the woman. In basketball, combat sports, field hockey. You read some of these things, like the combat sport one's pretty graphic. And it says, in the sixth and final fight in the women's MMA in 2014, trans-identifying male Boyd Burton, a.k.a. Fallon Fox, broke the skull of his female opponent, fracturing her orbital bone in an injury that also required 7 staples. It happened in the first round. Burton was 38 years old at the time. The female was only 26.
Oh, wow. This is back in 2014?
Media outlets quickly moved to, this is where it gets bad. Media outlets quickly moved to support Burton Fox, the offender, Outsports, going so far as to argue that the use of the word skull and fracture used in the reports of the incident was a direct attack on transphobes against him and other men playing in women's sports. Rumors circulating that Burton Fox had broken 2 women's skulls, while the media again downplayed the severity of the situation and clear danger men and women's MMA present female athlete, blah, blah, blah. And that's just the one, right? I read a bunch of these. Field hockey, rugby, soccer, just injury after injury after injury. And that's just the one page. But the biggest thing is the results were award and medal after medal, and that's depriving our girls, our women of things they've worked hard for.
Yep.
Slayed for, woke up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, went to practice, just parents taking them to whether there's a swimming competition or fencing competition, whatever it is.
How clever that
lacrosse.
they changed the narrative to you're transphobic
Right.
then, when it has nothing to do with,
Not at all.
And
it
You
takes
broke
away
the
from
girl's
everything women
skull,
fought for, right?
and now you can't
Yeah.
talk about it.
they can be trans. That's
No, it's-
fine. I have friends,
Right.
family, people.
For sure.
Like that's
we're-
not it. It's
that's not
just
the
you
issue,
can't.
right?
That's not
Yeah.
the issue.
Right.
How quick they are to change the narrative.
Yep.
So, Mr. School Board, where are we at in our
Well,
schools on this?
Well, this is not allowed in our schools at this point in time.
Well, Trump made
Yeah.
it not allowed, but
Right,
are we still having kickback on it?
I don't see any kickback on it as of now. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard where this is still happening in schools, and maybe you have.
Not
But
in Utah, I
that's-
haven't.
I haven't heard what's happening in Utah schools. So I think we're doing a pretty good job here.
I think our schools are doing really good because Utah State,
Yep.
Cedar City, and a couple other schools wouldn't play San Diego and
That's
just
right.
forfeited because they wouldn't play against a trans athlete down there. So I think we were standing up, did pretty
I
good.
think we have to stand up like that. That's the only way you get through this. And I think the next one is make sure we protect women's spaces too. You know what I mean? Because it'll elevate from there into the sports. And so when you mentioned that earlier in schools, I'm like, now I want to know. I want to know
Well,
where
I
that's
told this
happening
story
at.
last week. It actually came out in the news, and again, I said this last week. I forgot which school it was, but it was back east. I think it was in Philly, New Jersey, or something like this, where a girl was on a soccer team or something like that. Went into the locker room to change. Boy was in there, trans athlete, changing. So she left.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "I'll just wait for him to get done, then I'll go in and change." The boy turned her in for being offended because I think she said some shy remark and walked out.
Right.
The administration forced her to go back in there and change. Stood, and they said they were going to about ready to stand there and make her change in front of them, make her undress in front of not only the administration, but in front of the boy. I'm like, one, should be no teacher forcing a student to undress.
That's right.
They should be arrested and thrown in jail for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then two, if I'm uncomfortable, I need to be able to just walk out. But again, it's where they don't care about what your beliefs are or anything else like that. They it's not enough for you to accept them as gay, trans, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You have to accept everything with it. And if you don't accept it, I'm going to force it on you.
That doesn't work. It can't work that way. You know?
In a school, high school.
Right. Wow. It makes me more and more grateful we do live in the great state of Utah.
Amen.
There's a lot of things here that we do right, and this is one of them. So I'm grateful. It's good.
Yeah, well, I'm also grateful that we passed these laws long before Trump ever came in
That's
office.
right.
We were way ahead of the
That's
curve.
right. Yep. It's good.
Yeah, so
Yep. That's good.
you just monitor that, just make sure it
We
stays
will.
that way.
We will. 100%. We'll keep an eye on that. And I think
don't
for
want
the most
anybody-
part, the board is going to be on. You know what I mean? I can't imagine that anybody would be okay with those types of things. So
Well, I'm not so concerned about like our high schools and elementary schools because every parent out there would call that out. But
Right.
our universities are a different story.
yep. I think our legislators are doing a good job of standing up
Yeah.
for our you know what I mean, standing up in that area too to make sure those things
There's an
those
article I
spaces are
read.
protected.
University of Utah Utah Valley. They were upset that they were splitting up something on where the girls couldn't or the boys couldn't be in women's sports and stuff like that. And they were getting upset about it. And they says, no, that's the rule now. We have to abide by
it's
it.
the law.
Legislatures.
Sometimes I think we make it so all the people that want to be really nice and don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, when there's a law that they can lean on and say, no, that's the law, it almost helps them, right? To be able to do the right thing. Sometimes you need to pass a law like that to empower these guys. And we want them to have backbone and stuff, but sometimes they just don't. So it's easy for them to say, nope, it's the law. You got to do it now because it's the law. It helps out a whole lot more to do that. So
Well, actual article came out on that. I thought it was, why do you need a law to say no?
I think the legislator did them a favor. They probably didn't want it either, but they're getting pressure from sides that want them to allow these things in. And it's just nice to be able to say, no, you can't do that. It's against the law.
So this was back in 2022, but I still like bringing it up
I know, I remember.
because we have a governor.
Oh, I'd
In
love
his
if
own
he'd come
words.
around, talk about coming around.
That his own words had a soft spot for them. And again,
You can love them and you can love them. We
Yes.
should love everybody.
I was going to say that to 100%, and you can. Sometimes we'll do this thing at the fair where we'll set up a booth and we just share Christ with people. And I had a couple ladies that came up that were, affiliated with this community. They came up ready to fight. And when I didn't fight with them, but I really did share, and I talked about the fact that we're all sinners, right? We all have our shortcomings, and that Christ died for all of us, and just really shared my heart with them. Guess what? They came to church. They came to my church on that next Sunday morning
You're awesome.
because they didn't believe that when they came, the way that they were, that people would love on them. And you know what? They were overwhelmed. They didn't come back again after that, but they got a chance to see a picture of something pretty amazing. And I didn't forewarn people. I didn't tell anybody, hey, these girls might come, because I thought they were just saying that. I didn't think they would actually show up, but they did. They got loved on, and who knows how God will use that to really impact their life. And so I do think that you can love people and you can care about people, but when it comes to bringing those things in and trying to force them, just like they wouldn't want me to force what I believe on them, they shouldn't do that either in these spaces. So I think that's
Well,
I think that's fair,
I think that's
you
the
know?
problem is they are trying to force it on
Sure.
people. And again, be my guest. If you want to be LGBTQ community, I have nothing against you. If you want to go get married, I have nothing against you
Right,
doing that too. Keep it out of our schools. Keep it off our kids.
right. Agreed.
The whole law that California passed or Oregon was passing that the parents don't even have to know if their kids are transitioning.
Scary.
Scary. Then there's a state legislature up in Oregon that came out and said that once kids reach like 15 years old, that parents shouldn't have any rights to tell them what they can and can't do anymore.
Right.
Came right out and open said that.
Are they going to feed them, clothe them, take care of them? Like, really?
Can they be drafted
Yeah.
then?
I'm like, what in the world? Yeah, that's crazy.
It's crazy what's happening in some of these blue states. I just don't want it coming in here in Utah.
I agree. I think we're all trying to defend against that, right, here in the state of Utah. And I think that's why you're seeing some of the people elected that you've seen elected. In
That's why you're
especially this
elected.
last cycle, because people want to defend against that. We don't have the right people in the right place. We'll see it start to creep in and make its way in. So
Yeah, that's why you were elected. So
praise the Lord.
keep that out of there.
So grateful.
Well, I mean, that's most everything we were going to talk about with the school board.
Okay.
Get all the hard discussions in, all the hard topics in there, and make sure it's all out. But I hope everybody appreciates that and has some confidence in what direction the state's going right now, because I think it's going in a great direction.
I do too. And I think we need to keep praying, that it does, and pray for our board as a whole. We have some really good people on our board. A lot of people want to try to pick this apart and pick that apart. We have some great people on our board right now. I think our leadership has the ability to really foster some change that I think needs to happen in our state, especially in the realm of how education is done here. And you can say I'm being real vague on a few things because they're in the works, right? And you almost don't want to talk about them ahead of time and get players involved that shouldn't be. But I think we've got some great things in the works, and we're going to make some changes moving forward that our people are going to be very excited about. So,
Well, the first thing I'm glad is you guys brought prayer back in, so that I mean,
I'd love to bring it into the boardroom, but right now that's
It's
taking
not
it a little
happening.
too far.
Okay.
And the way we did it the last time was we just said anybody that wants to come and pray before a board meeting, come on in and pray. And everybody came in that room and prayed. So
that's great.
Pretty
And that's a good
exciting.
way to handle it
Yep.
too.
And let me tell you this. So I'm also the liaison to the state charter school board, and one of the charter school board members had an issue. Her granddaughter got in a terrible car accident. And they knew I was a pastor, and when we took a break, they said, "Would you pray?" And the whole board gathered together. We prayed for her granddaughter, and anyways, from there, some miracles ensued.
That's
some great
beautiful.
things happened. But I thought, man, how awesome is this? To be able to do that. So I'm grateful for the state we live in. That's something that's promoted here. People do care about their walk and their relationship with God. It does mean something to them. So
And when are you up for re-election again?
4 years. I got 4 years.
4 years.
Just getting started. Just getting
4
started.
years is good. I'm glad it's not like a little 2-year stint or something
Oh,
like
me
that.
too.
That'd
I'm
be
so
tough.
thankful. I don't know how our House of Representatives, I don't know how they do that. Every 2 years, got to re-gear up again. I'm sure after 1 year, you got to be thinking about
Yeah,
re-election
you
already.
have to be campaigning while you're doing your job.
It's hard. It's hard.
Keeps you on your toes.
It
Oh,
does.
but I think
It
what it
does.
also does is it makes sure that they stay in tune with their constituents too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because a lot of time, I think that's a lot of problem with a lot of our senators are up for 6 is like, that's what happened with Romney is he got into office and then lost track of what people wanted him to do.
Right.
Didn't
Want
care
to be
anymore.
popular.
Yep.
Didn't
Yep.
care anymore. Oh, I got 4 or 5 years. It'll pass. People forget about it.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah. Right.
And just completely lose what your constituents want you to do. Whereas the House is a little more in tune because they have to be.
Yep. one of the things I committed to do is be in every school in my district. So I have some of Weber and some of Davis County school districts, 221,000 constituents altogether between both. I want to be in every school, and so we've already set out to do that. Because people can say anything they want to say. I want to go and see. You know what I mean? I want to see what's going on there. I want to be on the ground level. So I understand that. I understand what my teachers are going through, our parents are going through. We're going to have town halls on a regular basis throughout the year, maybe 4 a year. But just to stay plugged in and connected, because that's what we need to do, stay plugged in and connected so you know what's going on. I think what happens in the education space, if you're only dealing with people that are involved in the education space, you lose touch with what's happening outside of that. There's things that, and that's what I've realized what happens. You're looking at it through one lens, and you need to be able to step back and look at the whole picture from parents' point of view, from teachers' point of view, to be able to get a picture of the whole thing of what's happening there. So that's my goal, is to be in every school, to stay plugged in with our parents. We send out a newsletter. You can go to my website, rodforutah.com, and you can get on there and see my newsletter. I send out I want people to be aware of what's happening, what's coming up on the board.
Involved.
Yeah, the agenda. Watch if you can. They're a little boring, but stay plugged in so that you know what's going on in your schools. We're changing some things in our system where you can see how we vote now. You can see it already, but it's just harder to get to. But we've created a link on my website directly to that, so you can see the things that I'm voting for. So you can call me. You know what I mean? If there's something you don't like or something that's coming up and you want to share your heart about it, call and let's have a discussion about that, because that's what we're there to represent you.
Hey, one last thing before we end for the day. So I'm wearing the shirt. God's children are not for sale.
Absolutely.
Sound of Freedom came out a little while back. Eye-opening movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Eye-opening movie. A lot of sex trafficking going on amongst very, very young kids.
Yes.
Teachers probably seeing some of that. Have you seen any of that? Heard of any of that?
No, I mean, probably the only time I feel like it's happened in our ministry. It happened to a girl that's more like college age, but she had some special needs, and she got plugged in with someone on the internet, and next thing you know, she was gone. She disappeared, and don't really know what happened to her, but I think that's probably what happened.
What happened?
So I'm not really seeing that, but I would encourage parents to stay plugged in with your kids.
Stay plugged in.
Another thing is a sextortion, I think is what they call it, when you
blackmailing.
That's a big one.
It's a big one now.
It's a big one.
I've had that in my
and it
circle.
starts with
we tried to-
16.
That's right, committed suicide. And I had a kid call me one day, and he said, "This is what's about to happen. Bad stuff's about to be released online about me." And he went on to tell me what he had done, that he had gotten coerced into sending a video, and he was super embarrassed about it, but I was so grateful that he picked up the phone and called and didn't do something dumb.
That's
You know
so
what I
great,
mean?
because most of
Yeah.
them were so embarrassed to
I'm
do it.
so
They'll just go into
thankful
hiding.
he felt like he could do that. And, we talked to his parents, and everything got taken care of, but it's a big one. And I talk to our kids about that all the time. Like, if you find yourself in a situation, you don't even know how you got there. Maybe you went through some doors you shouldn't have went through, and please pick up the phone and call. Don't believe this stuff, and that's how sometimes kids will get
Pulled in.
pulled in.
Well, it starts off with sexting, right? Where they all of a sudden they feel like it's normal, and they start doing it amongst each other,
right.
and then
Yeah,
all of a sudden they find out that one of them that they were sexting wasn't a fellow student; it was
That's
somebody
right.
else.
That's
And
right.
all of a sudden they get pulled in the wrong direction.
they're in trouble. Yeah.
They're in big trouble.
Yeah. I think just staying communicating and keeping those doors of communication open, and parents keeping an eye on what's happening with their kids. It's super important to keep them from going down.
Keep them safe.
Walking through those doors.
I mean, the kids are the most important things in our lives.
Absolutely. Yep.
God loves kids more than he likes the adults too.
Yeah.
So he's got a soft spot for the kids.
There's a great verse. It says, "As arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth."
Well, I
We
like
have
the
this
verse that it's better
responsibility.
to put a millstone around your neck and get drowned in the depths in the sea.
To
That
mess
is
with
to
one of
mess
these
with
little
ones.
ones.
And that's how I feel about it
I
too.
know, I do
Just
too.
mess with the kids,
I do
you're
too.
messing with me. And
I do too. Yep.
yeah, danger is there. So glad to have you on board. Glad
Man,
to
that's a
make the podcast. I know this is going to help a lot of people out there to kind of know what's going on in society. I hope a lot of people, again, share, subscribe, like, get the word out so that we can make this podcast bigger. We appreciate everybody being with us, and This is God and Country.
Yeah.
I can't see